Chapter 577. Yi Xian shook his head and smiled when he heard Ayu's words. It seemed that the irascible Ayu was very fearful of the owner of the three swords at the top of the pagoda. But this was normal. After all, the pagoda and the Tao laws had become like this because of the three of them. Yi Xian collected his thoughts and asked, "Miss Ayu, how do we awaken the Tao laws?" On the 5th floor, Ayu said, "Find a place with the power of the earth veins and activate it with the power of the earth veins." Yi Xian asked, "Is the power of the earth different from the power of the earth veins?" Ayu said angrily, "Aren't you just talking nonsense? The power of the earth is the power of the earth, and the power of the earth veins is the power of the earth veins. For example, men and women are both human, but are you the same as women? Are you the same?" Yi Xian was speechless. Ayu said again, "Go east, keep going. There is the power of the earth veins there." Yi Xian nodded. He glanced at the surroundings and then vanished. Before long he arrived at the depths of the mystic sea. Ayu told him to keep going, so he didn't stop and sped up. It didn't take long for him to completely vanish above the boundless sea. Northern Wasteland World, Sky Ascension City. Standing in Sky Ascension City, one could pluck stars with their tentacles. The entire Sky Ascension City was extremely tall, as if it stood in the starry sky. This was the most mysterious place in the Northern Wasteland World, and it was also the headquarters of the Order Alliance. Over 40 people stood in the Sky Ascension Palace, and the weakest among them was a Tao Realm expert. The palace was very quiet, as if they were waiting for someone. About 15 minutes later, a middle-aged man appeared at the entrance of the palace. The middle-aged man wore a tight white robe, and his long hair draped over his shoulders. His brows were filled with a heroic spirit, and he held half a book in his hand. The Star Lord. This person was the Star Lord of the Order Alliance. Everyone present bowed in unison when they saw the Star Lord. The Star Lord walked to the stone steps of the palace, sat down and said softly, "Let's talk about Yi Xian." At that moment, Protector Qin Tian walked out. Yi Xian comes from a small world. He came into contact with the Sword Tao at the age of 18 and is now a sword immortal. This person is extremely talented in the way of the sword, and the person behind him is even more unfathomable. However, I don't know who exactly it is. An old man suddenly asked, "Even we can't find anything?" Protector Qin Tian nodded, "No information at all." The old man frowned. "Is it from the God Nation? Divine Kingdom?" The expressions of everyone here instantly changed when they heard this. Although this faction had not appeared for a long time, as long as one was a member of the Order Alliance, they would never forget this faction. The body of Gu Tatian, the most outstanding Star Lord of the Lawful Order Alliance, was still hanging in the God Burial Plain. At this moment, the Star Lord suddenly said, "It's not them." Everyone looked at the Star Lord, and the latter looked at a skinny old man with his eyes closed. In the hall, only this skinny old man was sitting. Master Ku. This person was the military advisor of the Order Alliance. His position in the Order Alliance was only second to the Star Lord and two other special existences. Seeing the Star Lord looking at him, Master Ku opened his eyes and said softly, "The Order Alliance isn't the only ones who want that supreme treasure. The demon race, Tang clan and some other old monsters also want it. However, everyone knows that whoever touches Yi Xian will be the first to suffer. Because the supreme treasure's power is limited in Yi Xian's hands, and Yi Xian can't change anything. Please continue to the next page. But if it falls into the hands of the major forces, it'll be completely different. Therefore, if we want to obtain that supreme treasure, we must first deal with the Tang clan and the demon race, not Yi Xian. Of course, we can't underestimate the southern sect's martial masters either. Similarly, they must first deal with us if they want to obtain that supreme treasure." The Star Lord nodded slightly. "Continue." Master Ku stood up. "It's precisely because of the concerns I mentioned that Yi Xian is still able to do as he pleases. During this period of time, the old man has researched Yi Xian. Not only did Yi Xian rely on his talent and strength, but he also relied on his intelligence. Of course, it's mostly because of his background. Is Yi Xian a person or a force? Or something else? We don't know anything about it." At this moment, Qin Tian suddenly said, "Master Ku, what do you think our Order Alliance should do now?" Master Ku said with a smile, "We have two options now. First, we can learn from the Tangs and wait and see. We will attack whoever attacks first. Second, we can attack first and use all of our strength to kill Yi Xian in one hit. However, we'll definitely be stopped by the Tang clan and the demon race." An old man suddenly asked, "Will they dare to fight us?" Master Ku replied softly, "They definitely will. Because once the supreme treasure falls into our hands, They can only bow down to us in the future. Just like us, we'll stop them at all costs if they try to snatch it from us. At this moment, Guardian Qin Tian suddenly said, "There's a third choice." The third choice. Everyone looked at Qin Tian. The latter said, "This person has a fatal weakness, and that's his younger sister. If we can control his younger sister, this person will be a sword of our Order Alliance. He can only slash wherever we want him to slash." Master Ku smiled. "That's true. However, we'll have to attack the Wuyuan sword sect if we want to control his younger sister. Although they no longer have their ancestors' clone, we'll still suffer heavy losses if they die together." Qin Tian smiled. "If you don't want to sacrifice anything to obtain that treasure, that's impossible, isn't it?" Master Ku shook his head. "Guardian Qin Tian, you've overlooked something. How do you know that the Tang clan and the demon race won't attack us when we attack the Shenwu city? What if the mantis stalks the cicada, unaware of the aureole behind it?" Qin Tian replied, "This will depend on the determination of my alliance. If we fight, we'll have to end it as soon as possible." As he spoke, he looked at everyone. "Yi Xian is good at hiding. Unless the Star Lord takes action personally, we won't be able to find him. Even if we find him, we won't be able to kill him, especially when the Tang clan and the others are secretly stopping us. If we control his younger sister, he'll come to us." Master Ku shook his head. "Guardian Qin Tian is right. However, there's a problem. What if we force Yi Xian to join the Tang clan or the demon race?" Qin Tian smiled. "He won't. Because to Yi Xian, his younger sister is more important than his life. Also, now that the Shenwu city has lost its trump card, we can take this opportunity to devour it. If we devour the Shenwu city, I'm sure I don't need to explain the benefits." Devour the Shenwu city? Everyone in the hall was tempted. The sword sect and Wuyuan in the Shenwu city had been passed down for so many years, so there must be a lot of treasures. Most importantly, there was a divine pulse in the Shenwu city. Divine pulse. That was the thing that everyone was tempted by. At that moment, the Star Lord who had been silent all this while. "This chapter is not over. Please flip the page." He suddenly looked at Qin Tian. "Are you confident in taking down the Shenwu city?" Qin Tian nodded. "Yes. However, we need support." The Star Lord asked, 20 enforcers, 2 Dao validation realm and 30 Dao realm. "Is that feasible?" Qin Tian nodded. "Yes." This lineup was enough to crush the sword sect and Wuyuan in the Shenwu city. The Star Lord nodded. "I'll leave this to you. Master Ku will lead the rest. Pay attention to the Tang clan and the demon race and stop them from supporting the Shenwu city." Then he got up and disappeared. Master Ku looked at Qin Tian. "Be careful of Yi Xian. Don't underestimate him." Qin Tian nodded. "I'll have to trouble you with the Tang clan and the demon race, Elder Ku." Master Ku nodded and left with everyone. Qin Tian also left. Filling Sky Sea region. After flying on his sword for about 2 hours, Yi Xian arrived at a small island. The island was huge and it was the largest island he had seen in this part of the sea. Yi Xian stood on the ground, and the great Dao Law suddenly condensed between his brows. Yi Xian said, "Miss Ayu, what should we do now?" Inside the prison pagoda, Ayu said, "Use the great Dao Law to sense the surrounding earth force, then use the earth force to sense the power of the earth vein in the depths. Finally, absorb the power of the earth vein. After that, it might wake up." Upon hearing that, Yi Xian hurriedly did as he was told. Soon, with the help of the earth force, he sensed the surrounding earth force, the boundless power of the earth. He hurriedly followed the earth force to sense the earth vein that Ayu mentioned. After a long time, Yi Xian said in a deep voice, "Miss Ayu, I don't feel it." Ayu said, "Then cry." Yi Xian was speechless. Ayu said, "Do you think it's that simple? Use your concentration. The earth vein is hidden in the depths. If you don't use your concentration, then how would you be able to sense it?" Yi Xian nodded. He calmed himself in concentration, and a short moment passed before he started to slowly sense the earth vein again. However, he still didn't sense anything after a long time passed. Yi Xian fell silent for a short moment before he utilized the dragon soul. As soon as he utilized the dragon soul, his spiritual energy and soul instantly multiplied. Just like that, around an hour passed before Yi Xian's expression suddenly changed. Because he sensed a trace of faint energy. It was extremely similar to the energy of the earth vein, but it was even purer. The energy of the earth vein. Yi Xian knew that it was definitely the energy of the earth vein. He continued searching, and it didn't take long for him to notice more and more energy of the earth vein. All of it was hidden extremely well and very difficult to notice. Meanwhile, Ayu suddenly said, "Activate the Great Tao Law and absorb it." Yi Xian hurriedly did as he was told when he heard this. In next to no time, the energy of the earth vein started to converge towards him while the color of the Great Tao Law between Yi Xian's brows grew darker and darker after it absorbed the energy of the earth vein. Around an hour later, the Great Tao Law between Yi Xian's brows suddenly trembled violently, and then a strand of dazzling golden light erupted from it. At this instant, Yi Xian suddenly raised his head, and a strand of formidable energy shot into the sky from within him. At this moment he really felt like he was the master of the world and he felt like he could defy the heavens. End of this chapter. Chapter 578. Power. At this moment Yi Xian felt like his body was filled with boundless power. It made him feel like he was invincible. Suddenly, the Tao Law between his brows started to tremble violently. Yi Xian's expression changed. "What's going on?" Ayu said, "It's about to wake up." Yi Xian spoke solemnly, "Will it attack me when it wakes up?" Ayu replied, "I don't know." Yi Xian was speechless. Ayu continued, "If it attacks you, use the pagoda to suppress it. It's already within the pagoda, so it can't defeat the pagoda." Yi Xian heaved a sigh of relief when he heard this. That's good. Otherwise, if every single Tao Law was like a you, then it would be impossible for anyone to live. Suddenly, the energy of the earth and the veins of the earth in the surroundings vanished. The Tao Law gradually calmed down as well. Yi Xian gazed at the Tao Law in silence. Suddenly the Tao Law turned around and fled. Yi Xian was speechless. Ayu suddenly spoke angrily, "What are you still standing there for? Hurry up and chase it." Yi Xian hurriedly chased after it, but he noticed that the Tao Law was running really quickly. Meanwhile, Ayu said, "Activate this damn pagoda. Get it to help." Yi Xian hurriedly activated the prison pagoda. This time, the prison pagoda didn't refuse, and it immediately appeared between his brows. In the next moment, a strange force flashed, and it didn't take long for the Tao Law to be enveloped by a mysterious force. In the next moment, it vanished on the spot, and when it appeared again, it was in front of Yi Xian. Yi Xian was about to speak when the prison pagoda smashed against the Tao Law. Bang! The Tao Law was blasted flying, and the prison pagoda smashed against the Tao Law. Yi Xian was speechless. A moment later, the great tunnel suddenly flew in front of Yi Xian. It stuck close to Yi Xian as if it was asking for help. The world prison pagoda still wanted to charge over. Yi Xian immediately said, "Stop, it already knows its mistake. Don't hit it again." The prison pagoda stopped. It bounced left and right before returning to Yi Xian's body. Yi Xian looked at the great Tao Law in front of him. "Why did you run?" After a moment of silence, a voice suddenly sounded in Yi Xian's mind. "I'm afraid." His voice was a little immature, like that of a child. Could talk. Yi Xian was stunned. Then he asked, "What are you afraid of?" The voice sounded again. "Afraid of it?" Yi Xian shook his head. Needless to say, he was definitely talking about the world prison pagoda. This Xiao Ta was definitely not a kind person in the past. He had to be more careful in the future. Yi Xian collected his thoughts and said with a smile, "Don't be afraid. Just follow me, okay?" The great Tao Law fell silent for a while before it said, "All right." After that, it flew directly into the space between Yi Xian's brows and hid in Yi Xian's sea of consciousness instead of returning to the world prison pagoda. As for Xiao Ta, he didn't care about the great Tao Law as long as it didn't run away. At this moment, Ayu suddenly said, "It can fuse with your soul now. In other words, you can completely borrow all of its power. Of course you have to know." Yi Xian was puzzled. "What do you mean?" Ayu said, "You're so weak right now, so you can't bear too much earth energy and earth vein energy, let alone the legendary earth spirit energy. So, you have to restrain yourself when using it, otherwise you'll explode." Yi Xian nodded. "I understand." As he spoke, he carefully sensed the great Tao Law in his divine sense. It had to be said that this power was truly too tempting. However, this power didn't belong to him. Because without the great Tao Law, he wouldn't have this power. Strictly speaking, it was still external help. But now he couldn't give up on these external help. Regardless of whether it was the Order Alliance or the Tang clan, both were much stronger than him. Under such circumstances, he could only wait for death if he still gave up on these external help. As if he'd thought of something, Yi Xian asked, "Miss Ayu, what Tao Law do you possess?" He was very curious about it, "You as well." Ayu said, "None of your business. I'm telling you, don't even think about it. Otherwise I'll kill you." Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. This woman's temper wasn't ordinary, and it could be compared to the great god from the second floor. The great god from the second floor. Actually, he noticed that he actually missed the great god from the second floor. I wonder where she's gone now. A short moment later Yi Xian shook his head and was about to leave. However, the space before him suddenly trembled. Return to Divine Martial City quickly. Your younger sister is in danger. Your younger sister is in danger. Yi Xian's expression instantly changed when he heard this, and then he vanished on the spot. He was very familiar with the person who passed the message. It was Tang Qing whom he'd let go. Tang Clan Hall of Heroes. All the powerhouses of the Tang clan had gathered in the hall. The leader was Tang Yen. Below, Tang Qing said, I've received accurate news that the Order Alliance is going to attack Divine Martial City. Tang Yi smiled. See, we won't touch Divine Martial City, but the Order Alliance will. Saying that, he looked at Tang Qing. Big sister, do you have any countermeasures? Tang Qing said in a deep voice, we can't let the Order Alliance destroy Divine Martial City. Above, Tang Yen said, reason. Tang Qing said in a deep voice, the Order Alliance is definitely doing this for Yi Xian's younger sister Yi Ling. Once they control Yi Ling, it's the same as controlling Yi Xian. In that case, Yi Xian will become their sword. At that time, not only will they control the fifth-dimensional treasure, but they'll also have a super swordsman killer. Everyone should be very clear about Yi Xian's strength. If it's an assassination, even knowledge realm powerhouses won't be able to stop it. Even Dao validation powerhouses won't be able to stop it. Saying that, she looked up at Tang Yen. I suggest that we immediately send someone to stop it. Tang Yen looked at Tang Yi and Tang Feng. Do you have anything to say? Tang Feng pondered for a while and said, the Order Alliance must be on guard against our Tang clan and the Demon clan. If we attack, it means we'll have a falling out. Tang Yi smiled. Falling out will happen sooner or later, and sooner or later we'll have to do it. Why don't we attack first? However, I don't agree with helping them. Everyone looked at Tang Yi. Tang Yi said, first, Divine Martial City is not as weak as we think. Don't forget that they were at their peak. With such a foundation, they must have some trump cards that no one knows about. Just like our Tang clan, who would know our trump cards before we face the real threat of extinction. Second, we all think that Wuyuan Sword Sect only has one ancestor's clone, but what if they have two? Such a powerhouse, even if it's just a clone, is not something a Dao validation powerhouse can contend against. Third, why do we have to protect Yi Xian's sister? Can't Yi Xian protect her himself? And if he wants to protect them, he will definitely fight the Divine Martial Arts City with everything he has. At that time, we just need to watch quietly and see what kind of trump cards this Yi Xian has, and we can also see what other trump cards the Divine Martial Arts City has. Tang Feng nodded. Let them exhaust each other and we'll attack at the last moment. Tang Yi looked at Tang Qing and smiled. What do you think, big sister? Tang Qing nodded. Both of you have a point. Let the clan master decide. Tang Yi smiled and didn't say anything else. Instead he looked at Tang Yen. Above, Tang Yen said, don't make a move for now. Let's wait and see. As soon as he finished speaking, he disappeared. The experts of the Tang clan retreated in succession. Outside the hall, Tang Qing looked at the distant sky, thinking about something. Divine Martial City. Ever since the last incident, the Divine Martial City had been heavily guarded. Not only that, but all the experts from the Martial Institution and the Sword Faction had returned to the sect. Wuyuan. In a martial arts arena, a little girl was fighting with an old man. The little girl was extremely swift like a ghost, and her attacks were extremely ruthless. Every single attack was aimed at the old man's vital points. However, the old man easily dealt with them. The little girl was Yi Ling, and the old man was the previous dean of Wuyuan Wu Wen. After a short while the two of them stopped. Wu Wen looked at Yi Ling and said, you're still not fast enough, and your combat awareness is lacking. However, it's much better than last time. Yi Ling bowed slightly. Grandpa Wu, I'll work harder. Wu Wen smiled. He had to admit that he really liked the little girl before him. Perhaps it was because she'd suffered too much in Pine City, but Yi Ling didn't have the slightest air of a pampered disciple from a wealthy clan. Moreover, she was extremely sensible. Wu Wen smiled and said, don't be too impatient. You can't rush things in battle. You have to take it slow. Yi Ling nodded her head. Just when she was about to speak, an explosion that sounded like a clap of thunder resounded in the sky above the academy. Immediately after, a huge hole was torn open in the sky, and very quickly, 30 people flashed out from it like ghosts. When they appeared once again, they were already above Wu Wen and Yi Ling. Wu Wen's expression instantly changed drastically. It's the law enforcers. Activate the formation. As soon as he finished speaking, he pulled Yi Ling behind him, and then he suddenly waved his right hand. An enormous golden shield smashed towards the group of black-clothed figures. Right at this moment, numerous cold rays of light flashed by, and then the golden shield instantly shattered into countless pieces. In the next moment, a few tens of cold rays of light slashed towards Wu Wen. Wu Wen's pupils constricted abruptly. He suddenly pressed his palms together and pressed them forward. Heavenly Spirit Palm. Bang. An enormous palm suddenly stretched out from the space in front of him, and then it smashed towards the black-clothed figures. However, this enormous palm hadn't even approached the black-clothed figures when it was directly slashed into pieces. However, right at this moment, a sword howl suddenly resounded from the distant horizon. In the next moment, an old man appeared directly in front of Wu Wen, and then an expanse of light surged out and instantly forced the black-clothed figures over 100 m back. The person who'd arrived was the Sword Sect's extraordinary sword saint, Yu Wuchen. Besides that, countless Sword Sect swordsmen had suddenly left the Sword Sect and arrived at Wuyuan. There were an entire 12 Dao Realm swordsmen, and there were even 2 Dao Validation Realm swordsmen amongst them. On the other hand, all the experts of Wuyuan had obstructed Wu Wen and Yi Ling's path, and Enlancio and Mo Xie and the others had appeared as well. In midair, Qin Tian looked down at everyone below him, and his eyes didn't contain a trace of emotion. Kill? He didn't waste his breath. P.S. Yesterday this reader, Unfettered One, chatted with me for half the night, and he asked me to just update 2 chapters every day. He said that sitting for too long isn't good for the kidneys, and sitting for too long will cause impotence. He asked me not to follow in his footsteps. So, I didn't dare to write any more after writing 2 chapters yesterday. Chapter 579. Kill. As soon as he finished speaking, the 30 law enforcers charged towards Wu Wen and the others. They were like ghosts and were extremely swift. Besides them, besides Yu Wuchen, all the other experts from the Sword Sect who had rushed over to Wuyuan were stopped. Yu Wuchen himself was just about to attack when 2 powerful auras enveloped him. 2 Dao-proving realm experts. Yu Wuchen didn't dare to be careless and he said in a low voice, "Brother Wu Wen, watch out." As soon as he finished speaking, he transformed into a ray of light that shot towards the 2 of them. The 2 Dao-proving realm experts didn't dare to be careless. The person before them was an extraordinary sword saint. In next to no time, the 3 of them were engaged in an intense battle above Wuyuan. Meanwhile, the Dao realm experts from Wuyuan charged towards the law enforcers as well. However, they were instantly crushed. The difference in strength was really huge. Meanwhile, a figure suddenly charged towards Wu Wen and Yi Ling. It was extremely swift, and it arrived before Wu Wen in the blink of an eye. Wu Wen's expression turned ferocious. He clenched his right hand into a fist and punched forward. Bang! When he punched out, a powerful force swept out from his fist like a volcano eruption. It was a terrifying sight. Meanwhile, the black figure in front of Wu Wen suddenly punched as well. It was a very simple punch. However, the force released by Wu Wen's fist instantly vanished without a trace. In the next moment, Wu Wen retreated explosively. The figure didn't chase after Wu Wen, and it charged towards Yi Ling instead. Yi Ling's face was expressionless as he watched the figure charge at him, and there wasn't a trace of fear on his face. Right when the figure approached Yi Ling, a spear suddenly tore through the air beside him. The spear was like a bolt of lightning, and it emitted a sharp and ear-piercing tearing sound. The figure had no choice but to stop. Because if he didn't, then the spear would pierce through his head even if he caught hold of Yi Ling. This was a spear that could threaten him. The figure stopped abruptly and he grabbed towards the right with his right hand, blocking the spear with his palm. Bang! The afterimage forcefully blocked the spear. And the power of this spear directly shattered the black shadow that enveloped him. The black shadow dissipated, revealing a middle-aged man with long hair that reached his shoulders. Right at this moment, a white figure flashed by, and then a leg kicked the handle of the spear in the next moment. Boom! The long-haired middle-aged man instantly retreated 100 feet. The person that attacked was precisely Enlancio. Enlancio stood in front of Yi Ling, calmly looking at the long-haired man. The latter suddenly disappeared. Enlancio's beautiful brows knit together slightly. In the blink of an eye, her arms suddenly swept horizontally forward. Boom! In an instant, Enlancio had directly appeared 300 m away, but in the next moment she'd suddenly vanished. Rumble! An explosion suddenly resounded in front of Yi Ling, and the long-haired middle-aged man that was charging towards Yi Ling was forcefully pushed back by a formidable force. Enlancio appeared in front of Yi Ling once more. The long-haired man gazed coldly at Enlancio. He knew that if he wanted to capture Yi Ling, then he had to pass through Enlancio first. When he thought up to here, he slowly clenched his right hand, and then he suddenly stomped his right foot on the ground. Bang! The ground instantly collapsed into pieces. In the blink of an eye, an afterimage suddenly appeared in front of Enlancio. At the instant that this afterimage appeared in front of Enlancio, numerous afterimages had actually appeared in the surroundings as well. Every single afterimage was so real. Enlancio opened her palm, and then a fiery red spear suddenly appeared in her palm. In the next moment she suddenly swept it horizontally. The spear was like a flaming dragon, and a strand of flames instantly swept out and swept through everything. Rumble. The afterimages and the surroundings instantly vanished into thin air. At the same time, a figure instantly retreated 300 m away. It was the long-haired man. After the long-haired man was blasted back, he suddenly stretched out his right hand in the next moment, and then he pressed it down lightly. Where his palm descended, space seemed as if a pebble had fallen into the pool of water. Ripples arose from the pool of water that the pebble fell into. Enlancio's expression instantly changed drastically, and she suddenly stabbed the spear in her right hand forward. Rumble. The spear stabbed forward and it tore through everything. In the next moment, bang! Enlancio was instantly blasted flying along with her spear, and she flew for an entire 300 m away. She just stopped when a wisp of blood seeped out from the corner of her mouth. The long-haired man had suddenly vanished. Enlancio's eyes narrowed slightly. She suddenly let go of the spear in her hand, and then she clenched her right hand into a fist before she took a step forward. At the same time, her right hand smashed forward. Brink! Her fist struck out. Bang! The space in front of her instantly collapsed, and the ground in the surroundings was instantly transformed into powder. On the other hand, the long-haired man was forcefully forced to a stop in front of Enlancio, and he gazed calmly at her. Every generation produces geniuses. Enlancio's face was emotionless, and she just stood there in front of Yi Ling. Yi Ling's expression was calm as well, and she clenched her right hand tightly while a strand of energy silently condensed within it. At this moment, numerous shrill cries resounded incessantly within the Wuyuan. Tragic. Even if the Sword Sect and Wuyuan joined forces, they still weren't a match for the Order Alliance. If it weren't for the various formations in Wuyuan, all the Dao Realm experts in Wuyuan would have fallen long ago. In the air, Qin Tian hadn't made a move yet. He was waiting for Yi Xian. Yi Xian was proficient in assassination. If Yi Xian appeared, it meant that someone from the Order Alliance would definitely die. After killing them, Yi Xian would immediately hide. What he needed to do was to wait for Yi Xian to appear. Once Yi Xian appeared, he must restrain Yi Xian. Apart from the Order Alliance, there was another group of experts outside the Xinwu city. Tang Clan. When the Order Alliance attacked Wuyuan, they had already rushed over. Besides Tang Qing, Tang Yi and Tang Feng were also present. Behind the three of them, there were 30 Tang Clan cavalrymen, all of whom were Dao Realm experts. Beside Tang Qing, Tang Feng said softly, "Back then when Zhou Yafu was still in Wuyuan, how prestigious was Wuyuan back then? He alone is enough to suppress my Tang Clan and the Order Alliance. But now." Then he shook his head and didn't continue speaking. Tang Yi said with a smile, "The primordial race was so powerful back then, but didn't they still disappear? Everyone says that I control my own fate, but it's all nonsense. Who isn't immortal in front of fate?" Tang Feng smiled. "Second brother, I have a feeling that among the younger generation of the Tang clan besides seventh brother, you're the strongest." Seventh Tang. Hearing this, Tang Qing frowned slightly. Everyone in the Tang clan knew about this person. This person was known as the most monstrous person in the Tang clan after Munanji. However, he had no interest in the position of crown prince. He had left the Tang clan since young to travel. Even the clan leader couldn't do anything about him. It was worth mentioning that the seventh Tang was ranked second on the law rank. Tang Yi chuckled. "Seventh brother, boom." At this moment, a loud noise came from below. The three of them withdrew their thoughts and looked down. In the city below, Wuyuan's formations were disappearing one after another. Wuyuan's experts were falling one after another, including the Sword Sect. In Wuyuan. Enlancio looked to her right and her face darkened. Wuyuan's situation wasn't good. It was only a matter of time before they were defeated. At this moment, Wu Wen, who was fighting far away, suddenly sent a voice transmission. "Shaoan, take Yi Ling and leave. Take Yi Ling and leave." Not only did Enlancio hear this, but the nearby Mo Xie and Lian Wanli also heard this. Obviously, Wu Wen wanted to protect the geniuses of Wuyuan. At the same time, he felt that there was no hope. Leave. Enlancio looked at Yi Ling. "Leave?" Yi Ling looked straight at Enlancio. "No. I'm a member of Wuyuan. and Lanxiu smiled. All right. As soon as she finished speaking, she looked at Emocia and Lian Wanli. Emocia pondered for a moment, and then he looked up and closed his eyes slowly. In the next moment, a powerful force suddenly emanated from his body. In the sky, Qin Tian looked at Emocia. The latter's body started to tremble violently. At the same time, a strange red glow emanated from his body. Qin Tian's eyes narrowed slightly. Meanwhile, Emocia suddenly charged into the sky, and in the blink of an eye, he collided with an enforcer of the Order Alliance. The enforcer's reaction was extremely fast. He immediately transformed into a black shadow and charged at Emocia. A moment of silence. Bang. Under everyone's gaze, the law enforcer was sent flying. As soon as he stopped, his body exploded and blood splattered everywhere. Emocia stood on the spot. His right hand was wrapped in flames, and strands of powerful aura surged out incessantly from within his body. Qin Tian's eyes instantly turned icy cold when he witnessed this scene. Tang Yi looked at Emocia in the dark and said softly, "This person? Bloodline awakening, bloodline awakening." Such a person was definitely one of the top geniuses in the world. After all, the only person in the Tang family who had awakened his bloodline was the seventh young master Tang. Of course, bloodline wasn't the only standard for experts, but those who had awakened their bloodline were definitely not weak. Right at this moment, Lian Wanli suddenly raised her saber and charged into the sky. Her target was an enforcer as well. The azure dragon saber in her hand suddenly trembled violently, and then she slashed it at the enforcer. As the saber slashed down, an azure dragon that was over 3 kilometers long suddenly flashed out from the saber. Azure dragon roar. Bang. The enforcer was instantly devoured by the azure dragon. The azure dragon circled in the sky above Divine Martial City, and strands of dragon might shook down incessantly. Qin Tian stared fixedly at the enormous dragon that was over 3 kilometers long. At this moment, he realized that he'd underestimated this genius of the younger generation in Wuyuan. Meanwhile, Lian Wanli suddenly looked at Qin Tian and said, "Come, take this." As soon as she finished speaking, her body trembled and she charged towards Qin Tian. At the same time, the azure dragon in the sky suddenly turned into a ray of light and disappeared into Lian Wanli's saber. At this moment, she just happened to reach Qin Tian's head and slashed down with her saber. As the saber slashed down, the dragon's roar shook the heavens and earth. Qin Tian was expressionless. In the center of his palm, a ray of white light quietly condensed. In the next moment he suddenly lifted it up. Bang. A ray of white light shot up into the sky. Bang. The white light shattered, but Lian Wanli was directly sent flying. A few hundred meters away, Lian Wanli had just stopped when a ray of sword light suddenly flashed across the battlefield. Lian Wanli's expression changed drastically. She forcefully dodged to the side, but it was still a little too late. An arm was directly sent flying. And at Lian Wanli's original position stood an old man holding a sheathed longsword. A Dao validation expert. Moreover, he was a sword saint. The old man did not stop. His sword intent enveloped Lian Wanli, and the sword in his hand suddenly trembled violently, accumulating power and waiting to be unleashed. Below, Lanxio's expression changed drastically. Just as she was about to act, the long-haired man in front of her suddenly took a step forward, and an invisible pressure directly enveloped her. In the air, after the old swordsman's sword intent enveloped Lian Wanli, he lightly stomped his right foot, and from the sheath in his hand, a sword suddenly flew out at an extremely fast speed. Not far away, Lian Wanli knew that she had nowhere to retreat, so she fiercely slashed forward with the saber in her left hand. Sword arrived. Bang. The azure dragon saber shook violently, and Lian Wanli's left hand was directly shattered, blood splattering everywhere. And at this moment, another ray of sword light flashed across the battlefield, heading straight for Lian Wanli's forehead. At this moment, Lian Wanli knew that she could not block this sword. She slowly closed her eyes and softly said, "Yi Xian, after this queen dies, will you miss me?" Sword arrived. Blood splattered everywhere. Chapter 580. This blood wasn't Lian Wanli's blood, it was Yi Ling's blood. Yi Ling had suddenly appeared in front of Lian Wanli. And Lanxio was being held back by the long-haired man, but she wasn't being held back by anyone. So, she'd supported Lian Wanli decisively when she saw that he was in danger. At this moment, Yi Ling's palm was forcefully resisting that sword. However, her strength wasn't strong enough, so her palm was directly pierced through by the sword. However, it had saved Lian Wanli's life. Yi Ling stared fixedly at the swordsman who stood before her, and the latter suddenly pressed his fingers together and pointed. A strand of sword light flashed. Yi Ling disregarded the injury on her hand, and her figure shook as she charged forward and slapped her palm down. Rumble. As soon as her palm descended, the space in front of her instantly trembled violently, and a powerful force blasted directly onto the sword light. However, the sword light directly tore through Yi Ling's force, and it continued forward and slashed at Yi Ling. Yi Ling pressed her palms together, shouted lightly, and then suddenly moved forward. Bang! The sword light was forcefully stopped. Meanwhile, the old man suddenly vanished. Yi Ling's expression changed drastically, and she clenched her palm into a fist and smashed it forward. Bang! Along with an explosion and the sound of something tearing resounding, Yi Ling's figure was suddenly blasted flying. At the instant that she flew through the air, she smashed heavily against a hall in the end, and she hadn't even descended to the ground when a sword suddenly stabbed into her shoulder. Yi Ling's brows knit together slightly, but she didn't cry. She gritted her teeth and forcefully held on. The swordsman glanced at Yi Ling, and then his figure shook as he charged directly at Yi Ling. Right at this moment, a figure suddenly appeared in front of Yi Ling. Was Wu Wen. Wu Wen's expression turned savage. The profound energy within his body surged as he clenched his right hand tightly, and then a powerful force instantly condensed in his fist. In the next moment he suddenly smashed his fist forward. Rumble. The space instantly collapsed, and the powerful force forced the swordsman to stop. However, at the next moment, a beam of sword light slashed towards Wu Wen. Wu Wen fiercely clapped his hands together. Boom. This combination directly clasped a sword, but the powerful force also shook him to the point that he was forced to retreat repeatedly. In the air, Qin Tian glanced down, but he still did not make a move. Wait. He had never looked down on Yi Xian. He also knew that Yi Xian would definitely appear. Wait. He was waiting for Yi Xian to appear. The experts of the Tang clan were waiting in secret. They knew that Yi Xian would definitely return. In Yi Xian's heart, there was nothing more important than his sister. What they needed to do was wait for Yi Xian to appear and force out Yi Xian's trump card. Then they would let Yi Xian and Divine Martial City exhaust the Order Alliance. Tang Feng suddenly asked, "Are there any movements from the demons?" Demons? Tang Qing shook his head. "There's no news." Tang Feng nodded slightly. "Let's wait." Below in Wuyuan. At this moment, there were only a few arrays left in Wuyuan. Among them, 6 or 7 Dao Realm experts had fallen, and 8 or 9 Dao Realm swordsmen from the sword sect had fallen. It could be said that they had suffered heavy losses. In the air, the swordsman from the Order Alliance suddenly walked towards Wu Wen. At this moment, Wu Wen's body had unknowingly appeared with over 10 beams of sword light. Facing a Dao Realm sword sage, it was still rather strenuous for him. At this moment, the only transcendent sword sage, Yu Wuchen, was also being held back by 2 Dao validation experts. Although Yu Wuchen had the upper hand, he could not do anything to the other party in a short period of time. Wu Wen looked around. At this moment, the ground around the martial sect was littered with corpses. Among them, there were experts from the older generation, but most of them were from the younger generation. Looking at those young faces, Wu Wen clenched his fists, and his heart felt like it was being cut by a knife. This was what it meant to be a weakling. In a world where the strong were revered, the weak could only be bullied and slaughtered by others. Wu Wen looked at He Liantian, Qin Shan, and the rest who were not far away. At this moment, He Liantian, Qin Shan, and the rest were only holding on bitterly. The 2 of them were not in good condition and could not hold on for much longer. Not only had many experts from Wuyuan died, but many of the swordsmen from the sword sect had also fallen. There was no hope. Wu Wen turned to look at Yi Ling, who was pinned to the wall with a complicated expression. "Lass, why aren't you leaving?" Yi Ling clenched her fists tightly. "My brother said that if people don't betray me, I won't betray them." Wu Wen smiled faintly. "You have a good brother?" As he spoke, he turned to look at a group of Order Alliance members not far away and said softly, "Little fellows, you must remember. Remember today. Remember how our Wuyuan was bullied and humiliated by others today. In this world there is no right or wrong, only the strong and the weak. Being weak is the original sin." As soon as he finished speaking, a flame suddenly ignited in his body. Soul ignition. When they witnessed this scene, the expressions of everyone in Wuyuan instantly changed drastically. "Dean?" The eyes of countless experts from Wuyuan almost popped out of their sockets. However, they were being held back by the experts from the Order Alliance, and they were utterly unable to stop it. Behind Wu Wen, Yi Ling's tears flowed down her cheeks. "Grandpa Wu," Wu Wen said softly, "Lass, remember? Once a person is weak, they will be bullied. So you must become strong. You can only walk the path after this by yourself. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly transformed into a ball of flames and charged towards the experts from the Order Alliance. Nearby, the old swordsman from the Order Alliance suddenly said, "All of you retreat." As soon as he finished speaking, the law enforcers behind him retreated. The old swordsman clenched the sword in his hand tightly. The sword in his hand trembled violently, and it didn't take long for a destructive force to appear before him. The old man raised his hand and slashed down. Slash. As soon as the sword slashed down, the cry of the sword shook the sky, and a wave of sword light slashed down towards Wu Wen like a storm. Rumble. Rumble. Explosions resounded incessantly in Wuyuan. Under the gazes of countless people, the old swordsman retreated again and again. In the end, he retreated until he was outside Shenwu City. At this moment, the entire Wuyuan was in a mess. Wuyuan could be said to have been basically destroyed. The powerful aftershock of the explosion directly disrupted the battlefield and the surroundings. However, both sides didn't stop, and the Order Alliance still had the upper hand. Now, it was only a matter of time before Wuyuan and the Sword Sect were defeated. Outside Shenwu City, the old swordsman stopped, and a wisp of blood slowly seeped out from the corner of his mouth. In that instant just now, he'd forcefully resisted the force of Wu Wen's self-destruction. How terrifying was the force of the self-destruction of an expert like Wu Wen. The injuries that the old swordsman suffered could be said to be very serious. But fortunately, with Wu Wen's death, Yu Wuchen was being held back, and now the great formation of Wuyuan had basically been destroyed. Right now in Wuyuan, only in Lanxiu Mo Xie and Yu Wuchen still had the strength to fight. The old swordsman wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and walked towards Wuyuan. Inside Wuyuan, Yi Ling was guarding beside Lian Wanli. Both of Lian Wanli's arms had been chopped off, and his injuries were extremely serious. Yi Ling took out a huge pile of divine crystals and placed them in Lian Wanli's arms. "Sister Lian, you take care." After saying that, she turned and walked towards the old swordsman. Behind her, Lian Wanli said weakly, "Don't go." Yi Ling shook her head. At this moment, her tears were no longer flowing. She slowly walked towards the old swordsman. In midair, Qin Tian glanced at Yi Ling, but he still didn't make a move. On the ground below, Yi Ling stopped when she arrived at where Wu Wen had been standing. She looked in front of her, and tears unknowingly flowed from her eyes. She'd really treated Wu Wen like family. At this moment, the old swordsman suddenly pressed his fingers together and pointed forward, causing a ray of sword light to shoot out. Yi Ling suddenly raised her head and swung her hands forward. Two strands of energy swept out from the center of her palms. However, these two strands of energy had only just appeared when they were directly slashed into pieces by the ray of sword light. In the next moment, the ray of sword light pierced her left shoulder, and the powerful force dragged her backwards. In the end, the sword pinned her to the top of the palace, and as soon as it stopped, another sword silently arrived and pierced her right shoulder. Just like that, Yi Ling was pinned to the top of the palace by two swords, and her clothes had already been dyed red with blood. Yi Ling gritted her teeth. Even though she was in pain, she didn't make a sound. In the distance, the old swordsman was about to make a move when Yi Ling suddenly closed her eyes and roared furiously, "Brother!" Bus! The cry of a sword suddenly resounded in the sky. In midair, Qin Tian's eyes narrowed slightly, and he slowly clenched his right fist. In the dark, all the Tang clan's powerhouses looked in front of Yi Ling. A man had appeared there at some point. The man was Yi Xian. Qin Tian frowned slightly when he saw Yi Xian. He hadn't expected Yi Xian to appear in the open instead of hiding in the dark to assassinate him. This had exceeded his expectations. However, this was naturally a good thing for him. If Yi Xian had been hiding in the dark, he would have been a little afraid. However, if Yi Xian had come out in the open, his combat power was at most equivalent to a knowing state cultivator. Yi Xian walked to the front of the dilapidated palace. When he saw Yi Ling, who was pinned to the palace by two swords and covered in blood, Yi Xian was stunned. The next moment, Yi Xian slapped himself. I'm late. I'm late. I'm late. Yi Xian clenched his fists, feeling as if his heart was being cut by a knife. He clenched his fists so tightly that his nails dug into his palms, causing blood to flow. Tremble. Yi Xian's whole body began to tremble violently. At this moment, the blood in his body began to slowly boil. At the same time, rays of red light gradually appeared around his body. Anger. Self-blame. Of course, most of it was anger. Yi Xian had never been so angry before. The intensity of his anger was rarely seen. Under the influence of this anger, The blood in his body boiled more and more, and the red light around his body grew brighter. Not only that, but his hair also began to slowly change color. At this moment Yi Xian's expression suddenly contorted, as if he was in extreme pain. Catharsis. He felt like he was about to explode. In the distance, the swordsman frowned. He was about to make a move when Qin Tian suddenly said, "He's possessed." Going berserk? The swordsman looked at Yi Xian. Sure enough, Yi Xian's mouth was dripping with blood. Critical point. His anger and blood had reached a critical point, but he was so close to a breakthrough. However, if he couldn't break through this point, he would undoubtedly die. In the air, Qin Tian shook his head. How dramatic. I didn't expect the genius swordsman to force himself to death. At this moment Yi Ling suddenly said, "Brother, they're bullying me. Beat them to death, beat them to death." Hearing this, Yi Xian opened his eyes abruptly. His eyes were bloodshot. Almost at the same time, his black hair instantly turned blood red. Rumble. A ray of red light shot into the sky. The sky was dyed red. Chapter 581. The expressions of everyone in the surroundings changed. In the air, Qin Tian stared at Yi Xian. At this moment his face was very pale. In the dark, Tang Feng suddenly said softly, "This is bloodline awakening, bloodline awakening." Tang Qing stared at Yi Xian without saying a word. Inside the prison pagoda, Ayu opened her eyes and frowned. After a moment of silence, she closed her eyes again. No wonder. In the Wuyuan below, powerful auras were constantly emitted from Yi Xian's body. At the same time, his expression was extremely savage. At this moment Yi Xian was like a wild beast that had gone berserk. Yi Xian stared at the swordsman from the Order Alliance in the distance. His eyes were blood red, sending chills down one's spine. The swordsman looked at Yi Xian with a solemn expression. However, there was no fear in his eyes. The sword in his hand trembled slightly. At this moment Yi Xian suddenly roared, "Old dog!" In the next moment, a blood-red sword gleam flashed across the battlefield. Buzz! The sword hummed tore through the sky and shook the clouds. Yi Xian was extremely fast. He instantly arrived in front of the old man. This time he did not use his flying sword. Instead he drew his sword to determine life and death. Drawing his sword to determine life and death in a rage. In this state, the power of Yi Xian's sword was on a completely different level from the previous drawing sword to determine life and death. The swordsman's expression instantly changed when he drew his sword. His eyes were filled with shock. Without any time to think, the swordsman stabbed forward with his sword in his right hand. The sword moved like lightning and a cold gleam appeared. The two swords clashed head-on in the most direct way. It was a tit-for-tat. Yi Xian's sword fell. Boom. The sword in the swordsman's hand instantly shattered. At the same time he was sent flying several hundred zhang away. As he retreated, the space was torn inch by inch. It was extremely terrifying. Seeing this scene, Qin Tian's expression instantly changed. Not only Qin Tian but the hidden Tang clan experts were also shocked. Shattering a sword saint's sword with a single strike? Below, Yi Xian did not stop after he destroyed the swordsman's sword. He appeared in front of the swordsman again and slashed down with his sword. The old swordsman's expression instantly turned ferocious. He ignored the injuries on his body and used both his hands to guide rebirth upwards. Buzz! In an instant, countless sword lights soared into the sky and engulfed Yi Xian. However, as Yi Xian slashed down with his sword, the sword lights vanished. In the next moment, the swordsman was pushed back once again. As he was pushed back, he spat out a mouthful of blood. Yi Xian was just about to attack again when Qin Tian's figure suddenly flashed over to Yi Xian. Yi Xian suddenly roared furiously, and then he raised his sword and slashed down. Qin Tian spread open his right palm, and then an expanse of white light instantly enveloped Yi Xian's sword light. Rumble. The white light instantly shattered. At the same time, Qin Tian's figure instantly retreated by over 1 kilometer. As soon as Qin Tian stopped moving, Yi Xian had already appeared in front of the swordsman. The old man didn't even have the time to react before Yi Xian's sword nailed him to the ground. The swordsman stared fixedly at Yi Xian. "You're a sword saint." A sword saint. As soon as these words were spoken, everyone here was shocked. Qin Tian gazed at Yi Xian with slight disbelief as well. Actually, he'd noticed that Yi Xian was a sword saint when Yi Xian had slashed him back. A sword saint. Such a young sword saint. Qin Tian was extremely terrified when he thought about it. Yi Xian paid no attention to them and he walked over to the swordsman. The old man was about to speak when Yi Xian suddenly stabbed his sword into the old man's throat. Blood sprayed. In the next moment, under everyone's gaze, Yi Xian swung his sword wildly. In an instant, the old swordsman's body was cut into pieces. In next to no time, only a pool of blood and bits of flesh remained in front of Yi Xian. Qin Tian's face was gloomy to the extreme when he witnessed this scene. After Yi Xian killed the swordsman, he suddenly turned around. In the next moment, a ray of red light flashed, and the expressions of the nearby law enforcers changed drastically. They were Yi Xian's targets. The law enforcers didn't fall into disorder, and two of them charged directly at Yi Xian. However, their heads flew soundlessly into the air before they could even get close to Yi Xian. Flying swords. At this moment, Yi Xian's flying swords were so fast that even a knowledge realm powerhouse couldn't stop them. Yi Xian stopped and he suddenly stretched out his left hand. In the next moment, the blood on the ground suddenly trembled and soon, the blood condensed into blood swords under everyone's gazes. Qin Tian's expression changed drastically. Retreat. Not far away, the law enforcers immediately retreated, but Yi Xian's blood swords were even faster. Countless blood swords shuttled through the battlefield, and in an instant, the heads of 9 law enforcers flew into the air. As for the rest of the law enforcers, they had all retreated from Wuyuan. Instant kill. In the sky, Qin Tian's expression was terrifyingly gloomy. He didn't expect that Yi Xian wasn't just a sword saint, but he had also awakened his bloodline. He didn't know how strong Yi Xian was now. Thinking of this, Qin Tian had the intention to retreat. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly soared into the sky. In the next moment, countless flying swords shot towards the keepers of order. The expressions of the law enforcers changed drastically when they witnessed this scene, and they joined forces to resist it. Qin Tian raised his head and looked up into the sky. Meanwhile, a voice entered his mind, "Retreat. Retreat." Qin Tian's expression was slightly ferocious. Elder Ku, Wuyuan and the Sword Sect have lost over 80% of their Dao realm experts. Now, we just have to deal with Yi Xian, and then our Order Alliance will be able to take control of Divine Martial City. If we retreat now, then all our efforts will be for naught. Elder Ku said, his current strength has surpassed the Dao validation realm. Do you know that? Qin Tian spoke fiercely. So what? His bloodline has just been activated, so how long can it last? If we don't kill him with all our might, then could it be that we're going to allow him to continue growing? In the void, Elder Ku remained silent. Moreover, law enforcers were dying incessantly in the distance. Presently, anyone who obstructed Yi Xian would simply die. Moreover, all those who died in his hands died extremely miserably. At this moment, Qin Tian suddenly roared, "This person is already a sword saint. Are we going to let him grow into an extraordinary sword saint? At that time, who can kill him? It's better to sacrifice a little now than to leave behind a great calamity in the future." After a moment of silence, a voice resounded in the sky, "Kill." As soon as the voice resounded, a dozen powerful auras suddenly charged down from the sky. In the darkness far away, Tang Feng frowned slightly. "Attack." Tang Qing was about to speak when Tang Yi said with a smile, "Why should we attack now? Let's see what Yi Xian's limit is." Tang Feng nodded, "That's true. Whether Yi Xian is dead or alive, he should be able to exhaust the Order Alliance." At this point he looked at Tang Qing. "What do you think, big sister?" Tang Qing was expressionless. "Whatever you say." Tang Feng smiled faintly and turned his head to look down. In addition to the dozen newly joined Knowledge Realm powerhouses, there were also 2 Dao validation powerhouses, and these 2 people directly blocked Yi Xian. However, what made everyone speechless was that these 2 Dao validation powerhouses were actually suppressed by Yi Xian. Seeing this scene, Qin Tian slowly clenched his right hand and turned to look at Yi Ling below. "Capture that little girl first." Capture Yi Ling. Yi Ling was Yi Xian's nemesis. As long as Yi Ling was caught, Yi Xian would definitely be captured. As soon as Qin Tian's voice fell, several figures directly rushed towards Yi Ling below. At this moment, Yi Xian, who was fighting with the 2 Dao validation powerhouses, suddenly slashed them back with his sword. He held the soul-suppressing sword in his hand and suddenly pointed to the right. Split. As soon as he said this, the Knowledge Realm powerhouse who was rushing towards Yi Ling stopped in place and then fell straight down. His soul dissipated. At this moment, Yi Xian pointed his sword in the air again. Another knowing realm powerhouse fell. At this moment, everyone in the surroundings was flabbergasted by this scene. Qin Tian had a look of disbelief on his face as well. What the hell is going on? In secret, the expressions of Tang Qing and the others became solemn. Even Tang Yi had a trace of seriousness and vigilance in his eyes. Every single one of Yi Xian's trump cards was slightly terrifying. How many more does he have? Down below, the Dao knowledge state experts who had not yet reached Yi Ling all fell to the ground silently. Their souls had vanished and only their bodies remained. At this moment, the keepers of order in the surroundings were slightly panicking. After Yi Xian killed the powerhouses that were charging towards Yi Ling, he turned to look at the two people in front of him. At this moment, not only did his aura not weaken, it was constantly growing. Especially the murderous intent on his body, it was so strong that no one dared to approach him. At this moment, Yi Xian held the soul-suppressing sword tightly in his right hand, and his body was enveloped by a bloody glow. His blood was boiling and an endless stream of bloodline power spread throughout his body. As this power filled his body, he felt full of strength. Boundless power. This power didn't belong to him but the power of his bloodline. Of course, strictly speaking, it was also his own power. After all, it was his bloodline. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly vanished on the spot. Nearby, the expressions of the two Dao-proving realm powerhouses changed drastically, and they hurriedly attacked together. Rumble. Along with an explosion, the two Dao-proving realm powerhouses were forced back hundreds of meters by Yi Xian. As soon as they stopped, two flying swords silently appeared in front of them. Quick! This was the first thought that came to their minds. They joined their hands together and caught the two swords at the same time. But at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly appeared in front of one of the Dao-proving realm powerhouses. In the next moment he drew his sword and slashed. Draw the sword to decide life and death. The Dao-proving realm powerhouse's pupils constricted when the sword slashed down, and he held onto Yi Xian's flying sword with both hands as he raised it horizontally to block. The sword descended. Bang! The Dao-proving realm powerhouse was directly blasted hundreds of meters away, and as soon as he stopped, a blood-red flying sword pierced through the center of his forehead. A Dao-proving realm powerhouse had fallen. The surroundings suddenly fell silent. He'd killed a Dao-proving realm powerhouse while fighting two by himself. At this moment there was disbelief in his eyes and there was also fear, deep fear. Suddenly the space in the sky above Wuyuan cracked open, and then a figure flashed out like a bolt of lightning towards Yi Xian. Yi Xian drew his sword and slashed down. Bang! In an instant Yi Xian retreated hundreds of meters explosively, and as soon as he stopped, a wisp of blood slowly flowed out from the corner of his mouth. In the darkness nearby, Tang Yi looked at the person in front of Yi Xian and said softly, "Wang Jitsa." Tang Qing and Tang Feng's expressions instantly changed when they heard Tang Yi. The sage of calligraphy Wang Jitsa. The second on the Dao ranking of the previous generation. P.S. You scolded me at the second watch and you loved me at the third watch. What about the fourth watch? Chapter 582. He was ranked second on the previous Dao rankings. The Dao rankings were updated every 30 years. There were a total of 10 people on the previous Dao rankings, and Wang Jitsa was one of them. Moreover, he was ranked second. Moreover, Wang Jitsa was one of the 9 saints. Besides the unknown divine kingdom, there were 6 supreme experts in the chaotic universe. They were the Order Alliance's Master of the Star, the Southern Sect's Martial Master, the Tang Clan's Patriarch, the Monster King of the Demon Race, and 2 others who were unknown. Besides these 6 supreme experts, there were 9 other saints. Wang Jitsa was one of them, the Saint of Calligraphy. Moreover, he was an extraordinary saint of calligraphy. Strictly speaking, Yu Wuchen could be ranked amongst them as well after he attained the extraordinary Sword Saint realm. After all, ordinary Dao substantiation realm experts couldn't compare to them. Surmounting their realms of cultivation to challenge them? It was as difficult as ascending to the heavens. Because all of them were experts who could surmount their realms of cultivation to do so all those years ago. In the field, Qin Tian bowed slightly to Wang Ciji, "Wang Sheng." Wang Jitsa nodded and then he gazed at Yi Xian. He sized up Yi Xian and said, "The power of bloodline." Suddenly, a sword howl resounded from afar. Wang Jitsa looked up and saw a Dao substantiation realm expert descend slowly from the sky. It was the expert from the Order Alliance who'd fought Yu Wuchen earlier. Even though 2 Dao substantiation realm experts could keep Yu Wuchen busy for a while, they couldn't defeat Yu Wuchen. The remaining Dao substantiation realm expert didn't attack again, and he retreated instead. Yu Wuchen didn't chase after him. He descended in front of Wang Jitsa and gazed coldly at Wang Jitsa. The latter shook his head, "I'm not your match." As soon as he finished speaking, an old man suddenly appeared in front of Yu Wuchen like a ghost. The old man wore a tight-fitting robe, had a thin figure, and had his right hand behind his back. His gaze was sharp like a blade. He was powerful. Yu Wuchen's expression turned solemn. The old man's strength was definitely not inferior to Wang Jitsa, but he didn't know who he was. At this moment Wang Ziji, who was not far away, looked at Yi Xian. "Come, let me see how many trump cards you still have." Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes. At this moment the blood in his body was still boiling, and the power was still increasing. However, that power was eroding his consciousness. Gradually Yi Xian's consciousness became more and more muddled. Slaughter. There was only one thought left in his mind. Slaughter. As everyone watched, Yi Xian walked towards Wang Jitsa with the soul-subduing sword in his hand. At this moment, the soul-subduing sword had actually turned blood-red. Wang Jitsa calmly looked at Yi Xian. He did not look down on Yi Xian. Of course, he did not pay much attention to Yi Xian either. From the beginning until now, he had seen too many geniuses and killed too many geniuses. Confidence. His strength allowed him to be so confident. At this moment Yi Xian suddenly leaped up. In the blink of an eye he arrived above Wang Jitsa's head and slashed down with his sword. Draw the sword and decide life and death. His sword carried a peerlessly domineering aura. It seemed like this attack could kill anyone. Countless people in the surroundings sensed this aura. Wang Jitsa had an emotionless expression on his face as he stood below Yi Xian. He flicked his sleeve and space trembled slightly. In the next moment, bang! Yi Xian was instantly sent flying thousands of feet away along with his sword. After he blasted Yi Xian flying, Wang Jitsa suddenly made a grabbing motion with his right hand. As soon as he did that, a ray of light that had suddenly appeared in his grasp, and then he clenched his right fist lightly. Bang! The ray of light was instantly blasted into pieces. Wang Jitsa gazed at Yi Xian. Meanwhile, Yi Xian suddenly vanished once more, and then a ray of blood-red light tore through the surroundings. Ear-piercing explosions resounded incessantly like firecrackers. Meanwhile, Wang Jitsa took a step forward and tapped his finger forward. The space around his finger trembled slightly, and a powerful force suddenly blocked the blood-red sword light. After a moment of silence, the blood-red sword light exploded, and in that instant, a sword slashed down from above his head. Wang Jitsa didn't dodge and he met it with his fist instead. Bang! At the instant that Yi Xian's sword slashed against Wang Jitsa's fist, the space in the surroundings trembled violently before cracking apart. It was also at this instant that Wang Jitsa's brows suddenly knit together. In the next moment he flashed over 100 embark, and then he tapped the center of his forehead with his finger. In an instant his soul calmed down. In that instant just now, something had actually happened to his soul. Wang Jitsa raised his head and looked towards his opponent. Suddenly, a flying sword soundlessly slashed towards him. He pressed his fingers together and clamped down on the flying sword, and then he exerted force lightly. Bang! The flying sword shattered. But it didn't take long for countless rays of blood-red light to suddenly slash down towards him. The dense expanse of flying swords instantly drowned Wang Jitsa beneath them. At this moment Wang Jitsa took a step forward and smashed his fist forward. Bang! It was merely an ordinary punch, yet the rays of light were obliterated. It was a crushing defeat. Everyone was looking at Yi Xian and Wang Jitsa. It was undeniable that Yi Xian was very strong indeed, but the gap between him and Wang Jitsa was too huge. Perhaps Yi Xian wouldn't be inferior to Wang Jitsa in the future, but Yi Xian wasn't a match for Wang Jitsa at all. Wang Jitsa walked slowly towards Yi Xian. Needless to say, you really aren't bad. Of course, that's exactly why you must die here today. As soon as he finished speaking, he slowly clenched his right fist, and then a strand of energy silently condensed. In the distance, Yu Wuchen's face darkened. At this moment, he naturally wanted to help, but the petite old man's divine sense had locked onto him. As soon as he made a move, the petite old man would definitely act as well. At this moment, Yi Xian turned to look at Yi Ling, who wasn't far away. Yi Ling didn't cry. She just looked at Yi Xian and said, "Brother, I'm not afraid. Really, I'm not afraid at all." Yi Xian's hand trembled slightly. He grinned, but it was a somewhat sinister smile. It's all right. Brother is here." As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and charged towards Wang Jitsa. Bang! A powerful force swept out from Yi Xian's body. At this moment he didn't hold anything back. Dragon Soul Power, Dragon Power, Emoka Power, Divine Blood Technique. Coupled with the power of his bloodline, the aura that Yi Xian erupted with could only be described as terrifying. This had surpassed the aura of a Dao validation expert. As he charged towards Wang Jitsa, the aura on Yi Xian's body grew stronger and stronger. Soon he arrived in front of Wang Jitsa and slashed down with his sword. This sword contained far too much. Of course, the most important thing was his conviction. At this moment, his younger sister was behind him. If he retreated, his younger sister would definitely die. Yi Xian had nowhere to retreat. Since he couldn't retreat, then he would advance. He would carve out a path, draw the sword to decide life and death. With this sword, Yi Xian's killing intent was unprecedentedly strong. At this moment, Wang Jitze took a step forward and met the sword with his fist. As everyone watched, Yi Xian's sword slashed down fiercely. Bang! As a deafening explosion rang out, Yi Xian was instantly sent flying along with his sword. However, Wang Jitze was also forced to retreat a good 300 meters. The expressions of everyone in the dark changed at the sight of this. Yi Xian had actually pushed Wang Jitze back with a single strike of his sword. Wang Jitze glanced at his palm. There was a deep sword scar on his palm. A scar. Wang Jitze raised his head to look at Yi Xian. Meanwhile, Yi Xian was walking towards him again. At this moment, Yi Xian seemed to have gone mad. His expression was savage and warped, and his body emanated a strange red glow. He seemed like a wild beast that had gone berserk. Suddenly, Yi Xian vanished on the spot. A ray of blood-red light flashed, and everywhere it passed, space was torn apart like fragile paper. Wang Jitze's eyes narrowed slightly as he stood in front of Yi Xian, and a strand of killing intent flashed through them. In the next moment, he charged forward swiftly and smashed his fist down. Rumble. The space around them suddenly collapsed and fell into pitch-black darkness. A few breaths of time later. Bang. Another explosion resounded, and then a figure retreated explosively. It was Yi Xian. However, Wang Jitze had also retreated several dozen meters. After Yi Xian stopped, blood seeped out of the corner of his mouth once more. Not only that, but his entire body had also split open and blood flowed out incessantly. However, the blood was quickly absorbed by him. In the distance, Wang Jitze also had 2 sword scars on his body. He had been injured by Yi Xian. Qin Tian's expression darkened at the sight of this, and no one knew what he was thinking. At this moment, Tang Feng said softly in the dark, "This Yi Xian is probably reaching his limit." Tang Qing said, "Should we make a move?" Tang Yi shook his head, "It's not time yet. If we make a move now, we'll have to pay a huge price." Tang Feng nodded, "That skinny old man and Wang Jitze. Just these 2 alone are enough to make us lose many Tang clan knights." As he spoke, he looked down at Yi Xian and said, "Let's continue waiting and see if he has any other trump cards." Tang Qing did not say anything. She just looked down and no one knew what she was thinking. Below in Wuyuan, Wang Jitze looked at Yi Xian. At this moment, his eyes were filled with undisguised killing intent. In the next moment, he directly rushed toward Yi Xian. He was extremely fast, and in the blink of an eye, he arrived in front of Yi Xian. Yi Xian did not choose to retreat. Instead, he held his sword with both hands and slashed forward. The blood-red sword qi slashed to the end. As Wang Jitze punched out, the blood-red sword qi directly exploded. At the same time, a powerful force directly engulfed Yi Xian. Bang! Yi Xian brandished his sword rapidly. Streaks of blood-red sword lights kept striking out. However, Wang Jitze's strength was too strong. Therefore, he kept being forced to retreat. Meanwhile, Qin Tian's figure suddenly shook, and then he flashed towards Yi Ling. Obviously, he wanted to take down Yi Ling first. Not far away, when Yi Xian saw this, his expression instantly turned savage. In the next moment, he directly ignored Wang Jitze and his figure trembled, appearing in front of Yi Ling. When he saw Yi Xian, Qin Tian's expression changed, and he immediately wanted to retreat. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly roared, "Those who hurt my sister die." As soon as he spoke, he suddenly disappeared, and in the next moment, he appeared in front of Qin Tian. Yi Xian suddenly drew his sword and slashed. Buzz! A blood-red sword qi directly slashed down. Bang! Qin Tian was sent flying in an instant. The moment he was sent flying, a ray of sword light pierced through his forehead. Blood splattered. In the battlefield, Yi Xian looked around angrily and roared like a wild beast, "Who else?" At this moment, the blood in his body completely boiled, and waves of killing intent surged out like a tide. In the distance, Wang Jitze stared fixedly at Yi Xian. What bloodline? The more abnormal, the stronger. Chapter 583. He killed Qin Tian in an instant. Needless to say, Yi Xian's attack had shocked everyone. Even someone as powerful as Wang Jitze was slightly shocked. Qin Tian was a Dao Validation Realm expert, and he wasn't just any Dao Validation Realm expert. However, he was killed by Yi Xian with just 2 attacks. Moreover, the aura that Yi Xian exuded was even stronger than before. Especially in that instant, the power of Yi Xian's attack wasn't just a little bit stronger than before. After Yi Xian killed Qin Tian with a single attack, the surroundings suddenly fell silent. Everyone was looking at Yi Xian, this extremely abnormal young man. At this moment Yi Xian suddenly clenched his left hand. In the blink of an eye, the blood on the ground in the Wuyuan suddenly trembled. Then, the blood actually transformed into blood swords under everyone's gazes. The surrounding experts of the Order Alliance started to retreat slowly. At the same time their expressions were extremely cautious. They were extremely fearful of Yi Xian, especially Yi Xian's flying swords. Ordinary people couldn't stop them at all. Wang Jitze looked at Yi Xian. A black book had appeared in the latter's palm. At this moment Yi Xian suddenly pointed at Wang Jitze from afar. Slash. In an instant, thousands of blood swords suddenly shot towards Wang Jitze. Almost every single one of them could easily tear space apart. The reason why these flying swords were so powerful was because they were enhanced by the Dragon Soul energy. For the first time, a trace of seriousness appeared in Wang Jitze's eyes. He suddenly flipped open the black book in his hand as he looked at the countless blood swords. In the next moment he started chanting silently. Countless black ancient characters suddenly flew out from the book, and they directly flew towards Yi Xian's blood swords. Chi 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 chi. The sound of corrosion resounded incessantly. Under everyone's gazes, the blood swords disappeared one after another. In the sky, Tang Yi said softly, "The Book of Holy Words." Tang Feng looked at Tang Yi and asked, "What is the Book of Holy Words?" Tang Yi said softly, "In Wang Jitze's hands the power of a peak stage creation treasure has increased by at least 50%. I'm afraid it can be compared to a Dao realm treasure." As he spoke he looked at Yi Xian. Let's see how he'll deal with this. As soon as Tang Yi finished speaking, a throne suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian. The God King's throne. Under everyone's gaze Yi Xian suddenly sat down and clenched his left hand. In an instant, all the spiritual qi within a radius of 1,000 li was absorbed cleanly, and the black ancient characters in front of Wang Jitze also disappeared without a trace at this moment. Countless blood swords instantly drowned Wang Jitze. Rumble. Wang Jitze was pushed almost 300 m back before Yi Xian. At this moment, even though the blood swords had vanished, there were actually over a dozen scars all over his body. Everyone's gazes descended onto Yi Xian who sat on the God King's throne. To be more precise, they were looking at the God King's throne that Yi Xian sat on. A Dao realm treasure. Even great powers like the Tang clan and Order Alliance didn't have many such treasures. In fact, they could be counted on one hand. However, Yi Xian actually possessed a Dao realm treasure. Countless strands of spiritual qi converged madly towards Yi Xian, and they were about to surge towards the God King's throne. However, Yi Xian suddenly started to forcefully absorb the spiritual qi. He desperately needed the spiritual qi right now. The God King's throne was just about to resist when the energy of Yi Xian's bloodline suppressed the God King's throne, and then countless strands of spiritual qi instantly surged into Yi Xian's body. Yi Xian greedily took a deep breath. At this moment, he felt like he had an inexhaustible supply of spiritual qi within him. Wang Jitze glanced at the Book of Holy Wisdom that stood before Yi Xian. At this moment, the Book of Holy Wisdom had lost its effect. Because activating the Book of Holy Wisdom required a huge amount of spiritual qi, and all the spiritual qi in an area of 500 kilometers had vanished. How do I activate it? Moreover, all the spiritual qi had been absorbed by Yi Xian. Wang Jitze gazed at Yi Xian. Suddenly Yi Xian vanished. Wang Jitze's eyes narrowed slightly, and then he vanished as well. It didn't take long for Wang Jitze and Yi Xian to enter into battle once more. Wang Jitze had the upper hand, but Yi Xian gave off the feeling that he was getting stronger as the battle went on. Especially his flying sword. Even Wang Jitze didn't dare to be careless. Meanwhile, the rest of the experts didn't move at all. After Yi Xian killed a batch of the law enforcers, the Law Alliance no longer had an overwhelming advantage. Especially now, there was still Mo Xie and Enlan Xiu on Wuyuan's side. The strength of these two people was something that the Law Alliance's law enforcers feared. In the dark, Tang Yi smiled. It's a deadlock. Tang Feng nodded. If this deadlock continues, it will be more advantageous for us. As for the Law Alliance, Tang Qing said softly, the Law Alliance can either retreat or send more experts. Tang Yi smiled. I hope that they will send more experts, because this way we can see if Yi Xian has any other trump cards. Tang Qing's expression was calm, and he didn't say anything. Tang Yi looked down at Yi Xian and smiled. Fortunately, my Tang clan didn't force Yi Xian to his death. Otherwise we would be the ones to suffer losses. Tang Feng nodded. This person is so strong. We in the Law Alliance have greatly underestimated him. Tang Yi was about to speak when he suddenly looked up at the sky. Somewhere in the sky, the space suddenly split open. In the next moment, two old men walked out. Seeing these two people, Tang Yi's expression immediately became somewhat solemn. Experts above the Dao validation realm. These two people might not be stronger than Wang Jitsa. However, in this situation the Law Alliance had two more experts of this level. It was almost certain that they would win. At this moment, another three men in black appeared behind the old man. These three men in black were all at the Dao Confirmation Realm. Dao Confirmation Realm Law Enforcers. 5 people. In the dark, Tang Yi said softly, "It's over." In the sky, the two old men and the 3 Dao Confirmation Realm Law Enforcers suddenly disappeared. In the next moment, several powerful auras charged directly at Yi Ling. Their target was Yi Ling. Sensing this, Yi Xian, who was fighting Wang Jitsa, suddenly turned around and returned to Yi Xian. Looking at the 5 people charging at him, Yi Xian roared and slashed forward. Buzz! With the sound of a sword, a blood-red sword gleam surged out. However, the blood-red sword gleam was instantly shattered by the 5 people. Not only that, but Wang Jitsa also charged at him. 6 pinnacle experts. Behind Yi Xian, Yi Ling suddenly walked to his side. She held Yi Xian's hand and cried silently. "Brother, am I too useless? No matter how hard I try, I can't help you." When Yi Xian, who was already acting abnormally, heard Yi Ling's words, his hands trembled slightly. In the next moment he said painfully, Don't be afraid. I'm here." As soon as he said that, he stomped his right foot and the great Dao Law suddenly appeared between his brows. In an instant, the power of the earth and the power of the earth veins in the surroundings converged toward Yi Xian like a tide. At that moment, a sheathed sword suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian. The sword trembled violently as if it wanted Yi Xian to pull it out. Because it knew that this was the only time Yi Xian could pull it out. This was because Yi Xian not only had the power of the dragon soul and the power of the bloodline, but he also had the power of the earth and the power of the earth veins. This was Yi Xian's strongest moment. Looking at the group of people charging at him, Yi Xian did not hesitate at all. He grabbed the hilt of the sword and pulled it out. Buzz! The hum of a sword soared into the sky. A sword appeared in Yi Xian's hand. The moment this sword appeared, countless dark clouds suddenly appeared in the sky above the divine martial arts city. In the next moment, bolts of purple lightning flashed continuously within the clouds, and waves of pressure from the heavens and the earth pressed down on the ground. Purple divine lightning. Wang Jitsa and the others stopped in their tracks, their eyes filled with shock. This purple divine lightning was the legendary divine lightning. How could it appear? One must know that this type of divine lightning would usually only appear when an extremely heaven-defying genius broke through. For example, in the records, it had only appeared when Gu Tatian, Zhou Yafu of Wuyuan, and Mu Nanji of the Tang clan broke through. Chapter 584. The Sword. The sword in Yi Xian's hand trembled violently, and as the sword trembled, the terrifying pressure in the sky above the divine martial arts city became even stronger, as if it was about to crush the earth. The pressure was so strong that even Dao realm experts were on the verge of being unable to endure it. It was the true might of the heavens and the earth. Everyone was staring at the sword in Yi Xian's hand. What sort of sword is that? At this moment, the sword in Yi Xian's hand suddenly soared into the sky and pierced through the clouds. In the next moment, under everyone's gaze, the sword directly pierced into the layer of black clouds. A breath of time later. Bang! Suddenly, an enormous bang resounded in the sky, and then the countless layers of clouds dispersed before the gazes of everyone. Moreover, the divine lightning transformed into countless bolts of lightning that shot down from the sky. Moreover, the space in the surroundings actually started to gradually become illusory. Wang Jitsa's expression became extremely unsightly when he noticed this. That sword is harming the quintessence of the world. The quintessence? Every single world had its own quintessence. If that quintessence was lost, then everything in that world would wither away and humans wouldn't be able to cultivate. The reason many stellar regions had vanished was because their quintessence had vanished. However, the higher the level of a world, the stronger its quintessence was. Thus, no one dared to destroy it, nor was it impossible to destroy it. Just like this chaotic universe. If one wanted to destroy its quintessence, then only experts at the level of the Star-Lord and the others could accomplish it. Even though they could accomplish it, they didn't dare to, because divine punishment would definitely descend. No one wanted to go head-on against the Tendo of this world. The Tendo had allowed the people of the world to cultivate and made it convenient for the people of the world, but the people of the world couldn't open the door to the heavens and take a yard after taking an inch. However, at this moment, the sword in Yi Xian's hand was actually publicly harming the quintessence of this world. Moreover, it had even destroyed divine punishment. What sort of sword is that? Yi Xian didn't know what it was. All he knew was that there seemed to be nothing that he couldn't destroy once he held it in his hand. He could even annihilate the heavens with a single swing of his sword. This was the feeling. Yi Xian did not want to destroy the world. He only wanted to destroy the people in front of him. Under everyone's gaze, Yi Xian looked at Wang Jitze and the others with the sword in his hand. In the next moment he gripped the sword tightly with both hands. All around him, the power of the earth and the veins of the earth frantically gathered towards him. Not only that, but the bloodline power in his body was also growing at a crazy rate. Seeing this, Wang Jitze's expression became extremely grave. Retreat. Retreat. His intuition told him not to take Yi Xian's sword head-on. As soon as he finished speaking, Yi Xian, who was on the opposite side, suddenly dashed forward and slashed down with his sword. Slash. His voice was like thunder, resounding through the clouds and shaking the world. As Yi Xian slashed down with his sword, a ray of blood-red sword energy that could obliterate the heavens and the earth flashed through the battlefield, and the expressions of all the experts of the Order Alliance who stood before Yi Xian instantly changed drastically. It was truly capable of obliterating the heavens and the earth. This sword strike gave everyone the feeling that it could cut the heavens, split the earth, and destroy everything. Wang Jitze suddenly roared furiously. Retreat. As soon as he finished speaking, he took a step forward and brought his hands together. A powerful force condensed at the center of his palms, and then he blasted his hands forward. Bang! Bang! Two powerful forces surged out from Wang Jitze's hands. However, they seemed so weak before Yi Xian's sword energy. The sword arrived. Wang Jitze's two forces were practically obliterated in an instant. In an instant, Wang Jitze was blasted flying, and his body started to crack inch by inch as he retreated. It wasn't just Wang Jitze, all the experts of the Order Alliance who were too slow were obliterated as well. At this moment, the entire divine martial city started to collapse inch by inch, and the ground in the surroundings was collapsing layer by layer. The might of a single attack was enough to obliterate the heavens and earth. The remnant might of the attack lasted for nearly 15 minutes before it calmed down. At this moment, the entire divine martial city was in a mess. The experts of the Order Alliance in front of Yi Xian had already retreated outside the city, and only two of them were left. They were the two experts above the Tao-proving realm. The rest of the people below them had all disappeared. Even Wang Jitze was left with only his soul. Not only that, but his soul had already turned completely illusory, and there was nothing he could do to save the situation. In the dark, Tang Yi and the others from the Tang clan had extremely solemn expressions. With a single attack, nearly 30 Tao Validation Realm experts were killed. Not only that, but Wang Jitze, who was their leader, was also about to disappear completely. Tang Feng and the others couldn't believe what they were seeing. Was this done by a 20-year-old youth? Below, after Yi Xian swung his sword, he held it with both hands and supported himself on the ground. His head was lowered, and blood flowed continuously from the corner of his mouth. At this moment, the red glow on his body had slowly faded away. However, the earth energy was still in his body, including the dragon soul and dragon energy. At this moment, Yi Ling grabbed Yi Xian's hand and said in a trembling voice, "Brother?" Yi Xian was silent for a moment, and then he wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and grinned. "I'm fine. Don't be afraid, brother can still fight." Hearing this, Yi Ling's tears flowed down. Yi Xian said softly, "Don't cry. As long as brother is here, the sky won't collapse. Even if it does, brother will carry it for you." Yi Ling hugged Yi Xian's arm tightly. He didn't say anything, but tears flowed down his face. Yi Xian raised his head and looked into the distance. Wang Jitze, who was about to disappear, was also looking at him. Wang Jitze's eyes were somewhat dazed. "I never thought that I, Wang Jitze, would actually die in the hands of a youth who's not even 20 years old." As soon as he finished speaking, he looked into the depths of the void. "This kid can't be left alive." As soon as he finished speaking, his soul completely disappeared. His soul was destroyed. "This kid can't be left alive." After a moment of silence, a shapeless pressure suddenly appeared in the sky above Martial God City. As soon as this pressure appeared, the expressions of everyone from the Wuyuan and Sword sect changed. Even the extraordinary Sword Saint, Yu Wuchen, had an extremely solemn expression on his face. In the dark, Tang Yi looked into the sky and said softly, "Has the Star Master made a move?" A huge hand suddenly appeared in the sky above Martial God City, and then the city below started to tremble violently. The might of this palm strike was several times stronger than the sword strike that Yi Xian had executed earlier. Below, within Martial God City, no matter if it was the disciples of the Wuyuan or the sword sect, all of their faces turned pale. We can't stop it. This was what everyone's intuition told them. Yi Xian raised his head to look at the huge hand. There was no fear in his eyes, and he just held onto Yi Ling's hand tightly while the sword in his right hand trembled lightly. Helplessness. At this moment Yi Xian didn't feel helplessness in his heart. He only knew that he had tried his best. As long as he had tried his best, it was enough. Just as the huge hand was about to fall, Yu Wuchen suddenly looked at Yi Xian. I'll leave the sword sect to you. As soon as he finished speaking, he stomped his right foot and soared into the sky with the sword in hand. Under everyone's gaze, the sword ray directly slashed at the huge hand. Rumble. The huge hand suddenly collapsed, and Yu Wuchen rushed into the sky with the sword in hand. 15 minutes later, a figure slowly fell from the sky. At this moment, only half of the sword in Yu Wuchen's hand was left. Sect leader. Below, countless sword sect disciples were so furious that their eyes almost popped out of their sockets. Yi Xian looked at the slowly falling Yu Wuchen, and the sword in his hand trembled violently. At this moment Yu Wuchen steadily landed in front of Yi Xian, and at this moment, Yu Wuchen didn't have the slightest breath. Yi Xian was stunned and then he looked up into the sky. At this moment, a man appeared. Star Lord. The person in front of him was the Order Alliance's Star Lord. Yi Xian's expression turned ferocious and he roared, Tang Clan, if you help me restrain this person today, I will definitely kill all the Order Alliance's Dao Realm experts. There is only one chance and your Tang Clan doesn't want it. In the sky, the Star Lord looked at Yi Xian with a calm expression. At this moment, a voice suddenly resounded in the sky. Really? Yi Xian roared, really? As soon as Yi Xian's voice fell, a middle-aged man appeared in front of the Star Lord. This person was Tang Yan. Tang Yan glanced at Yi Xian below. What do you want to do? Do it. Yi Xian waved his right hand, and directly stored Yi Ling into the prison pagoda. The next moment he turned into a sword ray and shot into the sky. His target Sky City? In the dark, Tang Yi said softly, is he going to attack the Order Alliance? Could it be that he's crazy? Tang Qing's expression was calm, and no one knew what he was thinking. In the sky above the divine martial city, the Star Lord looked at Tang Yin. Is he going to start a war with the Order Alliance? Tang Yin said softly, this world is like this. If you don't destroy me, I will destroy you. If you have the same chance, you will also weaken my Tang Clan and even destroy my Tang Clan, isn't that right? The Star Lord looked to the right. There is still the Demon Clan. Tang Yin looked straight at the Star Lord. Compared to the Demon Clan, I am more afraid of humans. At least, even if the Demon Clan wants to start a war, they will only do it openly and not play dirty tricks in the dark. As he spoke, he shook his head and smiled. Star Lord, if it wasn't for my Tang Clan having clan head Mu, I am afraid my Tang Clan would have been eaten by the Order Alliance, right? The Tang Clan was like the sword sect's Wuyuan. They also had times when they were weak, and at that time the Tang Clan was almost swallowed by the Order Alliance. At that time, Mu Nanji suddenly rose up and saved the Tang Clan. It was also at that time that the Tang Clan understood that in this world, if one clan wasn't the strongest, there would be endless battles. Therefore, all these years the Tang Clan and the Order Alliance could be said to have restrained each other. Now that the Order Alliance had suffered heavy losses, the Tang Clan would not let go of this opportunity. Because if the Order Alliance was given this opportunity, they would do the same or even more ruthless. Opposite Tang Yin, the Star Lord was expressionless. This time he knew that he had underestimated Yi Xian. And this underestimation directly made the Order Alliance pay a painful price. After a moment of silence, the Star Lord turned to look at the direction of Ascending Sky City and said softly, Ascending Sky City has never been invaded by enemies since it was built. Clan Head Tang, you have to watch carefully and see if the person you think highly of can kill all the Dao Realm experts of the Order Alliance. Tang Yin smiled, I will watch. As he spoke, he looked into the distance. At the end, a sword light flew through the clouds, heading straight for Ascending Sky City. P.S. I haven't been praised for a long time. Can anyone praise me? Chapter 585. Most of the time, people lived for the sake of fighting for their pride. And Yi Xian wanted to fight for this pride. Sky Ascension City. This Sky Ascension City was the most mysterious city in the chaotic universe besides the Divine Kingdom. It had been 300 years since the establishment of the Order Alliance, and in these 300 years, this city had always been mysterious in the eyes of the world. It should be said that the Order Alliance was mysterious in the eyes of the world. How strong was the Order Alliance? This had always been a mystery. No one knew the true trump card of the Order Alliance, not even the Tang clan. Yi Xian didn't know. But he wanted to do it. He had already been bullied to this extent by the Order Alliance, so what else did he care about? He didn't care about anything. Either IF*CKU to death or UF*CK me to death. That was the mentality Yi Xian had now. Soon Yi Xian arrived at the foot of Sky Ascension City. But before he could walk up, a spear suddenly shot down from the sky above Sky Ascension City. Yi Xian raised his head and slashed down with his sword. As the sword descended, the spear was directly split into two. At this moment, a young man appeared in front of Yi Xian. The young man looked at Yi Xian with a solemn expression. At this moment, a voice suddenly resounded in his mind. Stand down. Stand down? It was the Star Lord's voice. The young man's face darkened. He glanced at Yi Xian. He didn't dare to disobey the Planet Lord's orders and was about to retreat. But right at this moment, a ray of sword light suddenly flashed across the field. A flying sword. The young man didn't even have time to react before his head flew into the air. Blood gushed out like a fountain. The eyes of the young man's severed head were wide open, filled with disbelief. After killing the young man, Yi Xian walked towards Sky Ascension City at the top of the mountain. No one obstructed him along the way and he soon arrived at Sky Ascension City. It had to be said that Sky Ascension City was really tall. Standing at the top of the mountain was like standing in the starry sky. Yi Xian naturally didn't have the time to look at the starry sky. He walked to the city gate with his sword in hand. A middle-aged man stood there. In the hands of the middle-aged man was a silver spear. Yi Xian didn't know who this person was and he didn't want to know either. Immediately, he rushed toward the middle-aged man with his sword in hand. The middle-aged man slowly closed his eyes. In the next moment, the spear in his hand shot out like a bolt of lightning. This spear strike was like the galloping of a powerful army, and it carried along a monstrous momentum. It was precisely this momentum that forcefully forced Yi Xian to stop. However, along with the sword in Yi Xian's hand slashing down, this momentum was directly slashed into pieces. At the same time, Yi Xian charged forward swiftly, and he held his sword with both hands as he slashed down fiercely. The middle-aged man did not retreat. Instead, he raised his spear at an extremely crafty angle, directly striking Yi Xian's sword. However, dang. The silver spear in the middle-aged man's hands was instantly broken into two. Yi Xian stepped forward and slashed down with his sword. The middle-aged man didn't dare to take the attack head-on. With a light tap of his feet, he floated backward, distancing himself from Yi Xian. The moment he stopped, two flying swords silently slashed down. The middle-aged man's expression didn't change. Using his finger as a spear, he lightly swept it forward. Boom. Yi Xian's two flying swords were directly sent flying. The middle-aged man glanced at Yi Xian in the distance, and finally, his gaze fell on the sword in Yi Xian's hand. Looking at this sword, his eyes were incomparably solemn. His spear was at the manifestation realm, but it was easily broken by this sword. What kind of sword was this? After a moment of silence, the middle-aged man said softly, "With this sword, I am no match for him." After saying that, he turned around and disappeared. If he could fight, then fight. If he couldn't, then he absolutely wouldn't. Absolutely not. This wasn't because he didn't have a backbone, but because he had a clear understanding of his own strength. After the middle-aged man left, Yi Xian continued walking towards Sky Ascension City. Right at this moment, a woman appeared in front of him. She was extremely tall and she was half a head taller than him. She wore a tight black dress and a glass pearl floated in her palm. She gazed at Yi Xian and she didn't waste her breath at all. The glass pearl suddenly flew out from her palm, and then the scene in the surroundings changed in an instant. The starry sky. At this moment only Yi Xian and the woman remained here. Both of them were in an expanse of starry sky, and the nearby Sky Ascension City had vanished as well. The woman in the black dress looked at Yi Xian. The glazed pearl in her hand started to spin rapidly. As it spun, the space in the field suddenly started to distort. At the same time, the power of countless stars converged towards Yi Xian who was nearby. The energy of the stars. Endless star force was gathering from all directions. And its target was Yi Xian who was not far away. Yi Xian's face was emotionless as he held the sword in his hand tightly. When the energy of the stars arrived above him, he suddenly leaped up and slashed down with his sword. A sharp sound of something tearing resounded. At the same time, the energy of the stars in front of Yi Xian actually started to shatter inch by inch. It wasn't just the energy of the stars, even the starry sky here had started to shatter. Meanwhile, the woman suddenly clenched her fist, and then the energy of the stars surged down towards Yi Xian like tidewater. Rumble. The entire expanse of the starry sky started to tremble violently, and then it collapsed into pieces. Just like that, after about 15 minutes, Yi Xian and the woman in the black dress returned to the front of Ascending Heaven City. At this moment, Yi Xian had moved 300 m back while blood flowed incessantly from the corners of his mouth. On the other hand, the woman was still standing on the spot, but the glass pearl in her hand had shattered. Glancing at the sword in Yi Xian's hand, the woman in the black dress fell silent. Meanwhile, Yi Xian walked towards the woman with the sword in his hand, and the sword in his hand was trembling violently. At this moment, Yi Xian's mind was clear because his bloodline had calmed down. At this moment he felt like he could slash through anything as he held this sword. No matter what stood before him, so long as he held this sword, then he would definitely be able to slash it into pieces. Yi Xian stroked the blade of the sword lightly with his left hand, and he spoke softly, "What's your name?" A sword howl resounded. In the next moment, the sword in Yi Xian's hand suddenly flew out and swung swiftly before him. In the next moment, two words appeared on the ground: heavenly retribution. Heavenly retribution. Yi Xian said softly, "What a good heavenly retribution. Today if anyone tries to stop me, I'll kill them. If the heavens try to stop me, I'll punish the heavens." As his voice fell, he leaped up and slashed down at the woman in the distance. In front of the heavenly retribution sword, space was weaker than paper. In front of Yi Xian, the woman in the black dress looked coldly at Yi Xian. With a flick of her sleeve, a black light shot towards Yi Xian like a sharp arrow. Yi Xian didn't dodge and instead slashed down with his sword. The black light was instantly split into two. However, at this moment, the woman in the black dress suddenly disappeared. Immediately after, an afterimage swept in front of Yi Xian. Before Yi Xian could react, a palm had already pressed against his abdomen. Yi Xian's entire body was about to be sent flying. However, at this critical moment, his left hand suddenly grabbed the woman's palm, and his right hand wielded the sword and slashed at the back of the woman's neck. However, the woman in the black dress was even faster. The moment Yi Xian drew his sword, her right hand suddenly punched at Yi Xian's temple. If the punch landed, Yi Xian's head would definitely explode. Yi Xian's left hand had no choice but to release the woman's palm, and he moved to the side to block. Bang! Yi Xian's entire body was directly blasted away, but a deep wound appeared on the woman's cheek. Blood slowly flowed along the wound, and in an instant, half of the woman's face was covered in blood. The woman in the black dress looked at Yi Xian with a calm expression, as if she wasn't affected by the wound on her face at all. On the opposite side, Yi Xian held his sword and walked towards the woman in the black dress again. At this moment, the woman in the black dress turned around and disappeared. Just like the middle-aged man from before, if Yi Xian didn't have this sword, the two of them were confident that they could kill Yi Xian. However, Yi Xian had this sword and they couldn't do anything about it. Yi Xian continued walking towards Sky Ascension City. In the void, the Star Lord looked at Yi Xian calmly, and no one knew what he was thinking. Not far from him, the Tang clan's patriarch, Tang Yen, glanced at Yi Xian. It had to be said that he felt slightly fortunate at this moment. He felt fortunate that he listened to Tang Qing and didn't target Yi Xian to death. Otherwise, it wouldn't be the Order Alliance that suffered losses today, but the Tang clan. Below, Yi Xian walked to the front of Sky Ascension City, and in the next moment he suddenly slashed forward with his sword. A ray of light flashed. Right when Yi Xian's ray of sword qi was about to strike the city gate, an old man suddenly appeared before the city gate, and then he waved his right hand, causing the ray of sword qi to be obliterated. Tang Yen suddenly shook his head and smiled when he saw the old man. "Old freak, your Order Alliance is really afraid of being laughed at by the world. You actually sent an old freak from 1,000 years ago." Old freak you. An expert from 1,000 years ago. He was an expert on the Dao rankings 1,000 years ago. Even though his ranking wasn't as high as Wang Jitse's, he'd lived for a long time. Besides the Star Lord, Old Freak You was one of the few people from the Order Alliance who'd lived for a long time. As for his strength, it was unfathomable. If such a person came to deal with Yi Xian, it would be obvious that he was bullying the weak. Old Freak You gazed at Yi Xian with an expressionless face. However, Yi Xian still had no intention of stopping. The sword in his hand flickered with light as if it wanted to pierce through the sky. When Yi Xian arrived in front of Old Freak You, the latter suddenly stomped his right foot, and in the next moment the space in front of Yi Xian started to crack inch by inch. Meanwhile, old Freak You suddenly vanished, and in the next moment, a powerful force suddenly smashed towards Yi Xian who was nearby. Yi Xian charged forward swiftly and slashed with his sword with both hands. Bang! The powerful force was instantly slashed into pieces by Yi Xian's sword strike. However, Yi Xian himself was instantly blasted backwards. He flew for an entire 300 m, and he just stopped when an afterimage flashed by. Yi Xian's expression changed drastically, and he suddenly slashed to the right. As his sword descended, it seemed like he'd slashed through something, but at the same time, a powerful force blasted against his stomach. A mouthful of blood sprayed from Yi Xian's mouth, and then he was blasted back once more. Besides old Freak You, there were two other people in front of Yi Xian. One wore a white robe and the other wore a black robe. Seeing the two of them, Tang Yan's expression darkened. The black and white supremes of the Order Alliance. Tang Yan looked at the Star-Lord and the latter spoke indifferently. Did I say that I wanted to fight him one-on-one? Tang Yan didn't speak. One-on-one? If it was him, he wouldn't choose one-on-one either. With that sword in hand, Yi Xian's strength was not something that an average person could fight against. After Yi Xian was blasted away, old Freak You and the other two charged at Yi Xian. Obviously, they didn't want to give Yi Xian any chance to catch his breath. In the distance, Yi Xian was about to attack when the Emperor Hound suddenly appeared in front of him. The Emperor Hound glanced at the three charging over, and then it looked at Yi Xian and chuckled, "Do you want to know how strong I am now?" Just as it finished speaking, a strong force suddenly crashed into its body. Bang! The Emperor Hound was instantly blasted away and then it crashed heavily to the ground. Yi Xian was speechless. Chapter 586. Senior Yu and the others paid no attention to the Emperor Hound that had crashed to the ground, and they charged at Yi Xian instead. Their objective was to kill Yi Xian. Yi Xian held his sword tightly while two types of sword intent surged madly from within him. Fight! He'd only come here with a single objective, and it was either one of them die. He couldn't defeat them? He didn't think too much about it. In any case, even if he couldn't defeat them, they would still attack him. Right when Yi Xian was about to attack, the nearby Emperor Hound suddenly roared, and then a powerful strand of beast pressure suddenly swept through the surroundings. Rumble. Senior Yu and the others immediately stopped, and then they turned around to look at the Emperor Hound. Yi Xian looked at the Emperor Hound as well. At this moment, the Emperor Hound had a ferocious expression on its face, and its entire body was growing explosively. In next to no time, its body was at least 10 times larger than before. Presently the Emperor Hound was the size of a small hill. Moreover, there were even two fangs that were over 3 m long in its mouth. Those fangs were white as snow, and they emanated a ghastly cold glow that caused others to shudder with fear. Besides that, there was a pair of black wings on the Emperor Hound's back. It had transformed. Yi Xian had heard the Emperor Hound say that it could transform. So, it seemed like the Emperor Hound had transformed right now. But he didn't know how strong it was. After it transformed, the Emperor Hound suddenly roared into the sky, and then the sky instantly dimmed down. The Emperor Hound. A trace of seriousness finally appeared in the eyes of the Star-Lord who stood in midair. The Emperor Hound. That's the legendary guardian beast of the God clan. Why is it with Yi Xian? The Star-Lord's brows gradually knit together. The Emperor Hound suddenly charged towards Senior Yu and the others, and it was so swift that it caused their expressions to instantly change drastically. It was too swift. Senior Yu, who led the group, could only instinctively block with his hands. Bang! Everyone watched as Senior Yu was blasted over 1 kilometer away, and his arms were instantly shattered as soon as he stopped. The expressions of the other two experts from the Order Alliance instantly became solemn when they witnessed this scene. The Emperor Hound walked towards Old Yu. With every step it took, the ground would shake violently. And around its body, a powerful pressure kept surging towards Old Yu. Elder Yu stared fixedly at the Emperor Dog. At this moment, his arms were no longer there. At this moment, the other two powerhouses directly blocked in front of Old Yu, and one of them said, "Old Yu, retreat for now and recuperate." Old Yu did not say any nonsense as he turned around and disappeared. The Emperor Hound looked at the two people in front of it. Its expression was ferocious and its eyes were filled with a strong murderous intent. Without another word, the Emperor Hound charged at the two of them. Yi Xian was about to attack the moment the Emperor Hound charged over. However, the middle-aged man and the black-dressed woman who had stopped him earlier suddenly appeared in front of him. Apart from that, there were 10 Dao verification experts around him. 12 super experts. In the void, Tang Yen frowned. It was obvious that the Order Alliance wanted to kill Yi Xian. There was only one reason for sending out so many experts, and that was to not give Yi Xian any chance. 12 super experts. Under such a lineup, it was impossible for Yi Xian to stop them at all. In the void, Tang Yen looked at Yi Xian silently. He had no intention of attacking. The Tang clan's goal was to exhaust the Order Alliance, not to truly fight the Order Alliance to the death. Because a decisive battle wouldn't benefit the Tang clan at all. Not only that, but the Tang clan's ultimate goal was the treasure. Below, the 12 experts did not waste any time and charged directly at Yi Xian. As he watched the 12 people charge at him, Yi Xian stabbed his sword into the ground before him, and then he slowly closed his eyes. 12 experts who had surpassed the Dao verification realm. Such a lineup wasn't something he could resist at all. But now he had no one to rely on. He could only rely on himself. In the sky, the Star Lord stared fixedly at Yi Xian. Does Yi Xian still have a trump card? He wasn't confident. Tang Yen also looked at Yi Xian below. If this Yi Xian didn't have a trump card, then only death awaits him. Under everyone's gaze, an illusory Xiaota suddenly appeared between Yi Xian's eyebrows. When this illusory Xiaota appeared, the Star Lord's expression instantly changed. Retreat. As soon as he finished speaking, he was about to attack, but Tang Yen directly blocked in front of him. The Star Lord roared angrily, "Scram!" As soon as he finished speaking, he directly attacked. But Tang Yen didn't retreat. Soon the two of them started fighting. Below, when the illusory Xiaota appeared between Yi Xian's eyebrows, his body began to tremble violently. However, an invisible pressure suddenly enveloped the 12 super experts. When they were enveloped by this pressure, the 12 people's expressions instantly changed. The middle-aged man in the lead and the black-dressed woman reacted the fastest. The two of them immediately fled. As for the remaining 10 people, just as they were about to flee, a blood-red punishment word suddenly appeared above their heads. The next moment, the 10 people directly disappeared. At this moment, Yi Xian's expression suddenly distorted. Not only that, his body actually began to crack, and blood continuously flowed out from his 7 orifices. It was incomparably shocking. He couldn't bear it. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly roared, "Emperor Hound! Quickly F***King run!" In the distance, the Emperor Hound that was fighting was stunned. In the next moment, it turned around and ran. At this moment, Yi Xian roared again, "Mother f***er, why don't you take me with you and run?" The Emperor Hound was stunned, and then it turned around and flew over to Yi Xian. In the next moment, Yi Xian flew onto its back, and the Emperor Hound was about to fly away with Yi Xian. Meanwhile, the middle-aged man and the black-dressed woman from before appeared in front of Yi Xian once more. But right at this moment, the illusory Xiaota appeared between Yi Xian's eyebrows once more. Their expressions instantly changed and they retreated explosively. Meanwhile, Yi Xian and the Emperor Hound had vanished into the horizon. Meanwhile, Yi Xian's voice resounded from the horizon. "I was just trying to scare you." Ah. The two of them were speechless. In the sky, the Star Lord and Tang Yen had stopped as well. At this moment, the Star Lord's expression was extremely gloomy. 10 super experts. His heart was bleeding. This was secondary. This time, the Order Alliance had lost over 40 Dao Realm experts. Moreover, even he couldn't imagine that all of them had died at the hands of Yi Xian. Moreover, Yi Xian was just a sword saint. This time they could be said to have suffered heavy losses, and it could even be said to be a serious injury. The Star Lord gazed at Tang Yen. The latter didn't say anything and he just turned around and vanished. The Star Lord's expression gradually calmed down. What a Tang clan. What a Yi Xian. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and vanished. At the end of the horizon, the Emperor Hound was dashing madly with Yi Xian on its back. At this moment, the Emperor Hound's speed was extremely swift when it had changed its voice. It didn't take long for the Emperor Hound to bring Yi Xian to the overflowing sky ocean, and it descended on a small island. Yi Xian rolled off its back as soon as he landed on the ground. Blood gushed out of his eyes, nose, and mouth like a fountain. Not only that, but his body was shaking violently as if he was having a cramp. The Emperor Hound's face fell when it witnessed this scene. It knew that Yi Xian had suffered backlash. Moreover, it was an extremely severe backlash. It had no other choice now, and it could only hope that Yi Xian would be able to endure it. Within the pagoda. After the 10 of them were taken into the pagoda, they were slightly dazed. Meanwhile, a woman appeared in front of them. It was a Yu. A Yu glanced at them and shook her head, "Too weak." As soon as she finished speaking, Their bodies actually started to gradually become illusory. They were horrified when they sensed this and they wanted to resist. However, they noticed to their astonishment that it was useless no matter how they resisted. Despair. At this moment, there was only despair in their hearts. Just like that, it didn't take long for them to vanish from the pagoda. Ayu left the pagoda and arrived before Yi Xian. Meanwhile, Xiaoling suddenly carried a huge pile of spirit fruits over to Yi Xian, and she placed the spirit fruits with the most abundant spirit energy into Yi Xian's mouth. However, Yi Xian didn't even have the strength to eat them. Xiaoling started crying when she saw this and she hurriedly said, "Don't eat them. Eat them quickly. You'll be fine once you eat them." However, Yi Xian still didn't speak. Moreover, his aura was growing weaker and weaker. Ayu gazed at Xiaoling. You care about him a lot?" Xiaoling raised her head to look at Ayu while tears flowed incessantly from her eyes. "Big brother is a good person." "Oh, a good person?" Ayu shook his head slightly. "He doesn't seem like a good person." Xiaoling paid no attention to Ayu. She hurriedly crushed the spirit fruits, pinched Yi Xian's mouth, and poured the juice from the spirit fruits into Yi Xian's mouth. Yi Xian swallowed the juice but it was useless. Xiaoling grew even more anxious when she witnessed this scene. Meanwhile, Ayu sized Yi Xian up and then he said softly, he first utilized the dragon soul and dragon energy, and then he activated his bloodline. After that, he utilized that lethal sword. All of that is already too much for his body to bear, yet he actually utilized the pagoda in the end. He's practically hopeless. Hopeless? The Emperor Hound frowned. There's no hope at all? Ayu fell silent for a moment before he said, "There's a chance, but..." Xiaoling suddenly gazed at Ayu. "What hope?" Ayu glanced at Xiaoling. Your quintessence is rather special. If he devours it then there's still hope." "Devour quintessence?" Xiaoling was stunned, and then she said with excitement, "Really?" Ayu spoke solemnly, "Little fellow, do you know that if he devours you, then you might vanish? Do you understand what I mean?" "Vanish?" Xiaoling blinked. "Does that mean I'll die?" Ayu nodded. Xiaoling clenched her fists tightly, and then she suddenly started crying. "I don't want to die. I still want to plant spirit fruits, I still want to play, I don't want to die." As she spoke, she suddenly sat down by Yi Xian's side, and then she placed her right hand between Yi Xian's brows. In the next moment, countless strands of quintessence energy surged towards Yi Xian. Xiaoling ceaselessly wiped away the tears on her face with her left hand, but the tears just wouldn't stop. "I don't want to die. I don't want to die. I still have many spirit trees to plant." Oh. Even though she said that, she didn't stop pouring quintessence energy into Yi Xian. At the same time, her voice grew softer, her face paler, and her aura grew weaker. Most importantly, her body grew more and more ethereal. Chapter 587. Right when Xiaoling was about to vanish completely, Yi Xian suddenly sat up from the ground, and he hurriedly pushed Xiaoling's hand away. In an instant, Xiaoling fell into his arms, and her body became illusory as if she was about to vanish. Yi Xian was horrified when he witnessed this scene, and he hurriedly looked at Ayu. At this moment, his eyes and face were filled with terror. When he was in the Order Alliance, he wasn't afraid at all even when he faced death. But at this moment he was afraid. He was afraid of losing this little girl. Ayu glanced at Xiaoling who'd closed her eyes and he shook his head. Yi Xian hurriedly sent the quintessence energy he'd just absorbed to Xiaoling. Meanwhile, Ayu spoke abruptly, "Both of you might die if you do that." Yi Xian paid no attention to Ayu, and the quintessence energy within him surged madly towards Xiaoling. As for himself, his face instantly turned extremely pale, and it was extremely terrifying. The Emperor Dog hesitated to speak and in the end, it only sighed lightly. Suddenly, Ayu said, "There's another way to save her." Yi Xian suddenly looked up at Ayu and the latter spoke solemnly, "Absorb the quintessence of this world." "I'm not talking about ordinary quintessence energy, I'm talking about the quintessence of this world's Tendo." Yi Xian hurriedly asked, "How do I absorb it?" Ayu gazed at Yi Xian. "Do you know what Tendo is?" Yi Xian stared fixedly at Ayu. "How do I absorb it?" Ayu shook his head. "If you forcefully absorb the quintessence of this world's Tendo, you'll be suppressed by Tendo. It isn't an ordinary expert and you're no match for it right now." Yi Xian roared furiously, "But I want to give it a try." At this moment he couldn't control his emotions anymore. Because he was really panicking. He was not afraid of death but he was afraid that his family and friends would die. Ayu glanced at Yi Xian and said, If you forcibly absorb the power of origin now, you will suffer the divine punishment of Tendo. You don't have the ability to resist the divine punishment. Even if it's me, I wouldn't dare, oh no, I wouldn't even dare to face it head-on. Do you understand? Yixian was in pain. Miss Ayu, I beg you, please don't waste time, okay? If there's anything, I'll take responsibility. I beg of you. Ayu looked at Yixian for a moment. In the end, she waved her right hand slightly. In an instant, the space was torn apart. Then wisps of dark purple origin purple gas appeared in the air. An extremely pure origin purple chi. Yixian made a grabbing motion in the air with his right hand. Soon, the original source purple gas surged toward him and Xiaolinger. As soon as Xiaolinger absorbed the origin purple chi, her body instantly started to solidify, even though it was very slow. Yixian's expression instantly eased up when he witnessed this scene. However, right at this moment, a shapeless pressure suddenly appeared in the horizon. The pressure of heaven and earth. Yixian looked up. Dark clouds had suddenly gathered in the sky, and within the thick layer of clouds, bolts of blood-red lightning danced like red snakes. Divine punishment. The Emperor Hound's expression instantly became solemn when it saw the blood-red lightning bolts. Even the heavenly punishment of a Tao-proving realm expert isn't this powerful, right? Ayu sneered, that's heavenly punishment. This is divine punishment. Do you know what that means? When an ordinary person breaks through, the Tendo will send down heavenly punishment. Actually, it's like turning a blind eye to it. After all, it doesn't dare to go too far. Since ancient times until now, there had been many people who defied the heavens and slaughtered Daos. If all the experts of this world gathered together, it wouldn't be difficult for them to overturn it. Therefore, the heavenly punishment isn't very powerful. It's just a symbolic test. If you pass, it's strength. If you don't, it's fate. However, this divine punishment means that it wants you to die. The Emperor Hound did not understand. Why? Ayu said calmly, the origin of a world is where the lifeline of the Tendo lies. It allows people to absorb the origin but only ordinary origin chi. The origin of the Tendo is its core. Apart from those top experts such as the Star Lord, no one else can absorb it. It's possible to absorb it forcefully using other methods, but you have to endure the divine punishment first. In any case, I can't endure it. Yes, I can't endure it for now. Do you understand? The Emperor Hound. At this moment, more than 10 powerful auras suddenly appeared in the surroundings. The one leading them was Master Ku from the Order Alliance. In the void, the Star Lord and Tang Yen appeared again. The Star Lord looked down at Yixian. Prying into the origin of the Tendo, ha. Not far away, Tang Yen frowned slightly. What was Yixian doing? Prying into the origin of the Tendo would cause one to be targeted by the Tendo. What was the Tendo? It was the spirit of the universe. Although they could also obtain the origin of the Tendo, that was an agreement with the Tendo. They could only obtain a certain amount every year and could not forcibly obtain it. Defying the heavens? Just treat it as a joke. Those who had not come into contact with the Tendo would never know how terrifying it was. However, Yixian dared to forcibly take the origin of the Tendo. He would definitely suffer the divine punishment of the Tendo. If he could not endure it, he would die. Endure it? That would be even worse. It had been many years since someone had defied the heavens. The surrounding experts of the Order Alliance did not make a move. They just watched quietly. They were not anxious at all. Because Yixian was fighting against the Tendo, they only needed to watch the show. Not far away, a woman quietly appeared. It was none other than Zhao Mu. Zhao Mu glanced at the sky and frowned slightly. In the next moment, she looked down at Yixian, and no one knew what she was thinking. Meanwhile, Yixian stood up. At this moment, he was still so weak, but he'd stood up in the end. He had to endure the divine punishment. He had to face everything by himself. Ayu spoke abruptly, I can't help you resist the divine punishment. I'm not a Tao law of this world. If I help, the divine punishment will be at least 100 times stronger, and it might even cause the Tendo to appear. Yixian nodded, Miss Ayu, just protect Xiaoling for me, alright? Ayu glanced at Xiaoling. Xiaoling was still absorbing the Tendo's origin, and Xiaoling condition had clearly improved. Ayu nodded, alright. As she spoke, she looked at Yixian, you really didn't raise her to eat her? In the beginning, she'd thought that Yixian had raised this little fellow in preparation to devour her one day. Devouring an origin was infinitely beneficial. Yixian glanced at Xiaoling and spoke softly, you must get better. When the time comes, I'll drive the 6th floor away and plant trees for you. As soon as he finished speaking, he walked towards the sky. In the sky, the pressure locked onto Yi Xian with precision. Yi Xian looked up and spoke softly, "Just lend me some origin energy. I'll return it to you in the future." Everyone was speechless. Crack. At this moment, a blood-red bolt of lightning suddenly fell from the sky. The negotiations had broken down. As he watched the blood-red bolt of lightning descend, Yi Xian gripped the sword in his hand tightly and shot into the sky. During this process, blood flowed continuously from the corner of his mouth. As everyone watched, Yi Xian's sword slashed at the bolt of lightning. Boom. The blood-red bolt of lightning was shattered by Yi Xian's sword, but at the same time, Yi Xian fell from the sky and smashed heavily onto the ground. As soon as he landed, Yi Xian spat out a mouthful of blood essence. At this moment, lightning flickered in the black clouds in the sky, and soon, another blood-red bolt of lightning descended. Nearby, the Emperor Hound was about to attack, but Ayu shook his head. "If you attack, the divine punishment will double and its power will double. The situation will only worsen." The Emperor Hound frowned when it heard this. Nearby, Yi Xian stood up, and his hand holding the sword was trembling. Yi Xian looked up at the bolt of lightning and in the next moment he stomped his right foot. Buzz! The cry of a sword resounded through the sky, and then a blood-red sword light slashed at the bolt of lightning. Boom! The blood-red bolt of lightning was instantly shattered by the sword light. However, Yi Xian smashed onto the ground again, and this time he smashed a huge crater into the ground. In the crater, Yi Xian vomited blood incessantly. Not only that, but his entire body had also split open, and his internal organs had also ruptured. However, the blood-red lightning in the sky was still there, and the pressure was growing stronger. The Emperor Hound's face darkened when it saw this. If this went on, Yi Xian would definitely die. At this moment, Yi Xian stood up again, but this time he could not even stand stably. Yi Xian looked up at the sky, wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and grinned. "Continue?" As soon as he spoke, he stomped his right foot lightly, and his entire body transformed into a sword light that shot into the sky. In the sky, another bolt of lightning was directly shattered by Yi Xian's sword light, but he himself smashed onto the ground again. In the void, the Star-Lord looked coldly at Yi Xian. To be more precise, he was looking at the sword in Yi Xian's hand. The reason why Yi Xian, who was already an arrow at the end of its flight, was able to withstand so many bolts of divine lightning was actually because of this sword. Even the divine lightning couldn't withstand this sword. "What sword is this?" At this moment, the sword in Yi Xian's hand suddenly broke free from Yi Xian's hand, and it slashed straight into the sky. Everywhere it passed, space was directly torn apart. Streaks of blood-red lightning suddenly struck down from the black clouds. Rumble, rumble. A series of explosions resounded in the sky, and countless bolts of lightning were shattered. Everyone watched as the sword sliced through all the blood-red divine lightning, and in the end entered the black clouds. Rumble. The entire black cloud layer instantly shattered. Seeing this scene, the Star-Lord frowned, but at this moment, a face formed by clouds suddenly appeared in the sky. The next moment, boom! That sword directly fell from the sky. Seeing this face formed by clouds, the expressions of the Star-Lord and Tang Yen in the dark instantly changed. The two of them quietly bowed slightly to this face. Even they had to maintain respect for the Tendo. In the sky, that face looked down, and the next moment, a three-colored divine lightning suddenly fell from the sky. The three-colored divine lightning contained three types of Tao laws of the four-dimensional universe. Seeing this scene, the Star-Lord and Tang Yan's expressions instantly changed. This kind of divine lightning. Even they might not be able to withstand it. One should know that when they first broke through, only two-colored divine lightning fell. But now it was three-colored. Obviously, this Tendo was enraged by that sword. Below, Ayu suddenly said in a deep voice, "Unstoppable." The three-colored divine lightning fell and heaven and earth trembled. Yi Xian looked at the descending nine-colored divine lightning. At this moment he knew that he was going to die. Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes. Xiaoling, big brother, I tried my best." At this moment Xiaoling, who was lying on the ground not far away, suddenly sat up. She said weakly, "Box, my box." "Box?" The Emperor Hound was stunned, and at this moment the prison pagoda sent out a little black. Xiaoling hurriedly hugged the box. She hurriedly crawled to Yi Xian's side and opened the box. A beam of white light shot up into the sky from the box. Everyone looked at the white light, and suddenly, a furry little fellow condensed in the white light. The little fellow was snow white, and it was holding a stick of candied hawthorn in its claws. P.S. I've been writing books for many years. I've never stopped updating because I feel that as long as there are readers, I have to be responsible for them. But now I actually want to stop updating. Am I too arrogant? Chapter 588. White Little Fellow. In the void, the Star-Lord looked at the white little fellow and frowned. What is this thing? Tang Yan's eyes were also filled with doubt. What was this thing? Below, the Emperor Hound and Ayu were also looking at the white little fellow. The little fellow's body was illusory. Obviously, this was not her real body. Under everyone's gaze, the white little fellow rubbed her eyes as if she had just woken up. Suddenly, she raised her head to look at the sky. In the sky, the three-colored divine lightning had already arrived above her head. The powerful divine lightning caused the entire sky to turn illusory. Looking at the three-colored divine lightning, the little fellow blinked. In the next moment, she shivered all over and turned to run. Run. Everyone was petrified. Just like that? The Emperor Hound and Ayu's expressions froze. In the void, the Star-Lord and Tang Yan were also somewhat stunned. Just like that? In the distance, the white little fellow suddenly stopped running. She blinked her eyes. Why did she have to run? Why did she have to run? The little fellow looked at her claws. Then, under everyone's gaze, she threw the candied hawthorn in her hand towards the three-colored divine lightning in the sky. A candied hawthorn condensed from a special kind of spiritual energy flashed across the battlefield. In the next moment, boom! In front of everyone's eyes, the three-colored godly thunder disappeared without a trace, as if it had never appeared in the first place. Everyone, in the sky, the white little fellow grinned and waved her claws at the illusory face in the sky as if greeting it. She usually did not fight. Fighting was usually done by others. For example, a certain young lady. At this moment, in the void, another divine lightning appeared. This time, it was four-colored divine lightning. Four-colored divine lightning that contained four kinds of Tao laws. As the four-colored divine lightning appeared, the surrounding space directly became illusory. The surrounding space could not withstand the power of the four-colored divine lightning at all. Looking at the four-colored divine lightning, the white little fellow blinked. Again. Wasn't it just for fun? Soon the little guy became angry. She opened her little paw and a candied haw appeared in it. Just as she was about to throw it out, she suddenly looked at the candied haw and blinked. She stuck out her little tongue and licked it. It was so sweet, so she licked it again. So comfortable. White little guy was obviously very happy. His eyes squinted and his face was full of smiles. At this moment, she had already forgotten that she was angry just now. All around, everyone was looking at the little white fellow licking the candied haws. In front of the divine thunder of Tendo, he still dared to eat Tanghulu. Below, Ayu looked at the little white fellow licking the candied haws, and could not help but ask the Emperor Hound beside him, "Is it really that delicious?" Emperor Dog. At this time, the four-colored lightning bolt had already descended. However, the white little fellow did not dodge or evade, allowing the lightning bolt to land on her. When the four-colored godly lightning landed on the little fellow, everyone was petrified. That was because the white little fellow was still there, but the four-colored godly lightning had disappeared. Was it absorbed? In the void, the Star-Lord's expression turned solemn. Tang Yan was the same. Absorbed the four-colored godly lightning? How was that possible? In the sky, the white little fellow's body suddenly trembled. Soon, she let out a heavy breath and a few lightning bolts flashed out of her mouth. In the void, the face looked down at the white little fellow below. This time it did not attack again. Because things had become a little complicated. And at this time, the white little fellow looked up at the face and in the next moment she opened her mouth and sucked. In an instant, the face trembled violently and then became illusory. The face's expression instantly changed and it frantically retreated, directly retreating into the starry sky. In the starry sky, the face looked at the white little fellow below in horror because just now, the little fellow had directly sucked away 1/3 of its origin chi. 1/3. What kind of concept was that? It could not be provoked. The face turned around and disappeared, leaving without the slightest hesitation. Seeing that the face had escaped in the void, the Star-Lord and Tang Yan looked at each other, their eyes filled with shock. At this moment, the shock in their hearts could not be any greater. That face just now was not the Tendo's original body, but it was definitely the Tendo's clone. However, this little fellow actually made the Tendo clone run away? What kind of monster was this? In the sky, the white little fellow blinked her eyes. It ran away just like that? Actually, she still wanted to suck. At this moment, she seemed to have thought of something and she turned around and flew in front of Xiao Linger. Just like that, the two little fellows looked at each other. At this time, the white little fellow handed a candied fruit to Xiaolinger. Xiaolinger took the candied fruit, and then she pointed at the half-dead Yi Xian on the ground not far away. The white little fellow glanced at Yi Xian, and suddenly she looked at the executing heaven sword in Yi Xian's hand. Seeing the executing heaven sword, she instantly flew into a rage. Under the shocked gazes of Yu and the Emperor Hound, she flew in front of Yi Xian and slapped the sword with her claws. The sword trembled violently, and let out a low whine that seemed to be somewhat painful. Just like that, the little white fellow beat up the sword for a full quarter of an hour. During this process, the arrogant sword did not dare to resist at all. It could only emit a low sword cry as though it was begging for mercy. Yu and the Emperor Hound looked at each other. They did not know why the white little fellow beat the sword, nor did they dare to say, let alone ask. However, the executing heaven sword was indeed a bit miserable. It did not even dare to escape and could only let the white little fellow beat it up. After a while, the white little fellow stopped. She glared at the sword again, and then quickly waved her little claws. Who knew what she was talking about? No one knew. No one dared to ask. At this moment, the white little fellow grabbed the executing heaven sword and threw it aside, and then she looked at Yi Xian who was lying on the ground. She blinked and then approached Yi Xian. After carefully sizing up Yi Xian, she pinched Yi Xian's ears with her little claws, and then gently pinched Yi Xian's nose and face with a trace of curiosity in her eyes. Yu. About 15 minutes later, the little fellow lightly tapped Yi Xian's stomach, and then listened attentively. Yu's face darkened. Is she listening to this fellow's pregnant? Emperor Hound. At this moment, the little fellow lightly waved her little claws at Yi Xian, and in an instant, a strand of violet energy directly surged into Yi Xian's body. In an instant, Yi Xian's injuries instantly healed at a speed visible to the naked eye. Seeing this scene, Yu and Emperor Hound's expressions changed. In the void, opposite the Star-Lord, Tang Yen smiled and said, Star-Lord, if you don't act now, it will be too late. The Star-Lord glanced coldly at Tang Yen, and then turned to leave with the experts of the Order Alliance. Naturally, he wasn't stupid. Now that the little fellow was here, act? Did he want to die? Tang Yen glanced at Yi Xian below, and he knew that he had to re-evaluate Yi Xian. Whether it was the Order Alliance or the Tang clan, they had to re-evaluate Yi Xian. Soon Tang Yen also left. Below, Yi Xian lay in a deep pit, but at this moment her body was recovering at an astonishing speed. Not only her body but even her soul was recovering. This speed of recovery shocked Emperor Hound and Yu. Gradually, Yi Xian's soul recovered, and at this moment the white little fellow suddenly flew into the world prison pagoda. Within the pagoda, the white little fellow sized up the surroundings. In the end, she arrived at the top of the pagoda, and when she saw a sword, she grinned, and then she waved her claw as if she was greeting it. At the top of the pagoda, the sword trembled slightly in response. The white little fellow grinned, and then she turned around and left the world prison pagoda. She arrived in front of Xiaolinger, and then she waved her claw. A strand of pure violet energy suddenly surged into Xiaolinger's body. In an instant, Xiaolinger's body directly recovered to normal. Moreover, that strand of pure violet energy was even changing her physique. Meanwhile, the Emperor Hound suddenly said, Can you give me some? When he saw the white little fellow, he knew that this might be the greatest opportunity in his lifetime. He didn't know why he had such a feeling. All he knew was that at this moment, his face wasn't important anymore. He had to make a request. Xiao Bai looked at the Emperor Hound and blinked. Meanwhile, the Emperor Hound took out a stick of Tonghulu and handed it to her. It was something that Xiaolinger had bought. It had casually taken one earlier, and now it was the perfect opportunity to present it to Xiaolinger. The white little fellow's eyes instantly lit up when she saw the Tonghulu. She took the Tonghulu and lightly licked it. Her round little face was filled with happiness. After a while, she suddenly looked at the Emperor Hound. She thought for a moment, and then she lightly waved her claw at the Emperor Hound. In an instant, a strand of pure violet energy surged directly into the Emperor Hound's body. The Emperor Hound's body trembled, and at the same time, its blood actually started to slowly boil. The Emperor Hound was overjoyed and it hurriedly looked at the white little fellow and said excitedly, "Thank you." As soon as it finished speaking, it turned around and returned to the world prison pagoda. At this moment, the little white fellow suddenly waved its little claw. In the faraway divine martial city, somewhere underground in the sword sect, a little black box suddenly shot up into the sky. In the next moment, the little box directly appeared in front of her. The white little fellow passed the box to Xiaolinger, and then she grinned, and then her body gradually became illusory. Xiao Linger hurriedly said, "Are you leaving?" The white little fellow nodded, and in her claw was still holding a tonghulu. Xiao Linger looked at the white little fellow and asked, "Will you appear again?" The white little fellow waved her claw quickly, as if she was expressing something. Gradually the white little fellow disappeared and only the tonghulu was left in the air. Seeing the white little fellow disappear, Xiao Linger's expression dimmed, and she was somewhat disappointed. At this time Ayu asked, "What did she say just now?" Xiao Linger looked at Ayu and said softly, "She said she was in a very very far place." "Very far?" Ayu raised his head and looked at the end of the horizon. The vast universe was truly vast. Even this four-dimensional universe was boundless. And the funny thing was, many people didn't even understand the fourth dimension, yet they wanted to understand the fifth dimension. Ridiculous and even more tragic. Ayu collected his thoughts and then looked at Yi Xian on the ground. At this time, Yi Xian's injuries had already recovered by 70% to 80%. Yi Xian stood up and looked at Xiao Linger. "Xiao Linger, that little fellow just now was?" Xiao Linger lowered her head slightly. "My friend." "Friend." Yi Xian smiled and didn't ask any more. He walked to Xiao Linger and said softly, "How is your body now?" Before Xiao Linger could answer, Ayu suddenly said, "Her body now is even better than when she was at her peak." Yi Xian looked at Ayu and Ayu said softly, "If I gave her a tonghulu just now, I'm afraid my body could also recover." At this point she suddenly took out a mirror and looked at the person in the mirror. She was expressionless. "You're so stupid." As soon as she said that, the mirror suddenly shattered. Yi Xian. Chapter 589. Regret. At this moment, Yu still felt some regret. Because she had underestimated the little white fellow's ability. In her opinion, her injuries could only be healed over time. However, when she saw Yi Xian and Xiao Linger fully recover, she knew she was wrong. The little white fellow could definitely help her recover to her peak quickly. And the price was just a stick of candied fruit. A stick of candied fruit. At this moment, Ayu's heart was in a mess. Just a stick of candied fruit and the little white fellow had given the emperor hound so much. She felt it was unfair. The more she thought about it, the more she felt it was unfair. With a cold snort, she turned and returned to the prison pagoda. He continued his seclusion. Xiao Linger also returned to the prison pagoda. She placed the box that the little white fellow had given her under a tree. She did not open it and no one knew why she did not open it. Outside the prison pagoda, Yi Xian looked at the executing heaven sword in front of him. He had to admit that this sword's lethality was truly powerful. Extremely powerful. From the beginning until now, apart from that face, there was nothing that could block his sword. With this sword, he was practically invincible in close combat. And the soul-suppressing sword was suitable for long-range attacks. It could be used to split souls. One far and one near. Yi Xian collected his thoughts. He put away the executing heaven sword and disappeared on the spot. Not far away, a woman stood quietly. This person was Zhao Mu. She did not make a move. A moment later, Zhao Mu turned and left. What Yi Xian had done in Sky Ascension City quickly spread throughout the northern wasteland domain. At this moment, in the several wastelands of the chaotic universe, except for the Divine Kingdom, Yi Xian's reputation had reached its peak. Yi Xian. He had killed dozens of Dao Realm cultivators from the Order Alliance. The dozens of Dao Realm cultivators were not the main point. The main point was that Yi Xian had killed people from the Order Alliance. In the current world, the Order Alliance was still the nominal leader. And this Yi Xian dared to challenge the Order Alliance. It could be said that among the younger generation, Yi Xian's reputation was like the midday sun, directly surpassing anyone on the law rank. Tang Clan. In the Hall of Heroes, all the elders and experts of the Tang Clan were present. The atmosphere in the hall was rather solemn. This time, the matter between Yi Xian and the Order Alliance also shocked them. In particular, even the Tang Clan would not have the nerve to underestimate Yi Xian's strength and trump cards. At this time, Tang Yin suddenly looked at Tang Qing, Tang Yi and Tang Feng. "Do you have anything to say?" Tang Feng said solemnly, "Re-evaluate this person." Tang Yi nodded. "If we want to take that treasure, this is the best time for us to act because right now, both the Holy Martial City and the Sword Sect are at their weakest. Of course, if we act now, we will also be in danger because Yi Xian is..." Then he shook his head and looked at Tang Qing. "What do you think, big sis?" Everyone gazed at Tang Qing. It could be said that Tang Qing's status in the Tang clan had risen greatly. It was exactly because of Tang Qing's suggestion that the Tang clan hadn't acted against Yi Xian. Otherwise, it wouldn't be the Order Alliance that would suffer heavy losses this time, it would be the Tang clan. All of them had underestimated Yi Xian. Tang Qing fell silent for a moment before he said, "Patriarch, elders, I think that we shouldn't focus on obtaining that treasure right now. We should study Yi Xian, the person behind him, and that treasure." Above, Tang Yen said, "Continue." Tang Qing nodded. "Yi Xian is still a mystery. Where are his limits? Is there anyone else behind him? Is it just one person or many? Those precious treasures of his and that imperial hound of the Shen clan. All of that shows that he isn't a simple person. Furthermore, the fact that he was able to touch that treasure proves that he already controls it. That treasure killed 30 Dao Realm experts in the blink of an eye. Instantly killed 30 Dao Realm experts." The expressions of everyone here became extremely solemn when they heard this. They were aware of what had happened in Sky Ascension City, and they were shocked that Yi Xian was able to utilize that treasure. Actually, it should be said that they feared it. At this moment, even the Tang clan didn't dare underestimate Yi Xian at all. Meanwhile, Tang Qing continued, "Besides that, we can't overlook something, and it's that the demon race has some old geezers. Especially the demon race, they haven't taken any action until now. I would definitely not believe it if they said that they didn't have any thoughts. Since they haven't taken any action at all, then there are only two explanations. Firstly, they're afraid of something and don't dare to act against us. Secondly, they're acting like we were, and they're responding to changes in the outside world by remaining calm. Regardless of what the reason is, we can't act right now. Otherwise, the Order Alliance might be a good example to us." Tang Feng nodded slightly. "Big sister is right. The important matter at hand is for our Tang clan to figure out who Yi Xian and the person behind him are. Only by truly figuring out our opponent's strength would we be able to minimize our losses." Right at this moment, Tang Qing spoke abruptly. "Why must we become his opponent?" Everyone gazed at Tang Qing upon hearing this. Tang Qing smiled. "Can't we make use of him? Presently, his relationship with the Order Alliance is definitely like fire and water, and the Order Alliance will absolutely not dare to allow him to grow. So here's the problem. Since the Order Alliance doesn't dare to allow him to grow, they'll definitely continue targeting Yi Xian, and Yi Xian will definitely resist. So this matter might just be the beginning and not the end." Tang Yi spoke softly. "Big sister, you mean that we should continue to watch from the sidelines?" Tang Qing nodded. "We can even help Yi Xian when it's necessary. Isn't it a good thing for our Tang clan if Yi Xian helps us exhaust the Order Alliance?" Tang Yi smiled. "But big sister, have you thought about it? If Yi Xian continues to grow, then not to mention the Order Alliance, even our Tang clan will probably be helpless against him." Tang Qing smiled. "Then what do you think our Tang clan should do? Should we immediately send people to kill Yi Xian like the Order Alliance did? Moreover, even if we use all our strength, won't the Order Alliance stop us?" As she spoke, she looked at Tang Yi. "Second brother, you still don't seem to understand one thing. The current Yi Xian is no longer a person. He's even more terrifying than a force. Since he can use our Tang clan to restrain the Order Alliance, why can't he use the Order Alliance or the Monster Clan to restrain our Tang clan? At that time, I don't know about the Monster Clan, but the Order Alliance will definitely be more than happy to help him target our Tang clan. It's such a simple matter. Can't second brother understand?" Hearing this, Tang Yi's eyes narrowed slightly. Tang Qing's words were a little harsh. What did one need to be the heir? Strength and talent. However, intelligence, or in other words, vision was needed. Tang Qing's words were undoubtedly saying that he didn't have a vision, that he didn't see deep enough, and that he didn't see far enough. The sentence was really very piercing. Tang Yi gazed at Tang Qing. "Big sister, your words are too harsh. Are you targeting me?" Tang Qing shook her head. "I just want to tell you to look at the whole picture. It's beneficial to the clan." An old man nodded slightly. "Qing is right. You really have to look at the whole picture. Otherwise, a single wrong decision might bring irreparable losses to our Tang clan." Tang Yi glanced at Tang Qing and then he smiled. "You're right, big sister. I've learned something." Tang Qing's face remained expressionless, and no one knew what she was thinking. Suddenly Tang Yen said, "Just as Qing said, our Tang clan won't act against Yi Xian from now onward, and we'll use all our strength to investigate him. Besides that, Tang Qing has been promoted to an elder from now onward. Besides being able to establish her own estate, she can even represent our Tang clan to recruit all sorts of monstrous geniuses and experts. Besides the Grand Elder and me, she doesn't have to explain her actions to anyone. At the same time, she can mobilize at least 50 Tang clan cavalrymen. The expressions of everyone here changed when they heard this. If it was said that Tang Qing only had a little power before, then now Tang Qing's power was huge. It could be said that besides the Grand Elder and Tang Yen, no one else could control Tang Qing. Moreover, she could mobilize 50 Tang clan cavalrymen. After all, Tang Yi and Tang Feng were only able to mobilize 30. Now, Tang Qing could be said to have completely surpassed them in terms of authority. Tang Yi gazed at Tang Qing and smiled, "Congratulations, big sister." Tang Feng grinned as well, "Congratulations, big sister." Tang Qing bowed slightly to Tang Yen, "Thank you, patriarch." Tang Yen nodded and said, "There's something strange about the Qing clan. There might be someone standing behind them, but I don't know who it is for now. All of you should take extra precautions against the Qing clan." All of them nodded. Tang Yen turned around and the others dispersed. At the entrance to the hall, Tang Yi suddenly walked over to Tang Qing's side. "Big sister is helping Yi Xian." Tang Qing remained silent. Tang Yi smiled and said, "I can tell, but can't the patriarch and the elders?" Tang Qing gazed at Tang Yi. "Second brother, in terms of fighting, besides the patriarch and seventh brother, no one in the Tang clan can defeat you. However, in terms of intelligence, you're really too inferior." Tang Yi gazed at Tang Qing. "What do you mean?" Tang Qing smiled and said, "The patriarch and the others can tell, but none of them say anything." "What?" "Because it's better for the Tang clan to be on good terms with Yi Xian than to be on bad terms with him. It's beneficial to the Tang clan, and I'm doing this for the sake of the Tang clan. So, I've obtained the support of the clan and the elders. But you." Speaking of this, she shook her head, "I may not be able to become the heir, but I will definitely live for a long time. But second brother, you're different. You're too ambitious, strong and talented, but you've neglected one thing, and that is that you're not the strongest. As long as you're not the strongest, you can only be a whetstone for others, and if you're not willing to be a whetstone, you may end up being replaced. Because the higher-ups will never allow internal strife in the clan. Do you understand?" Tang Yi chuckled, "Do you really think I'm worse than seventh brother?" Tang Qing shook her head, "You're not worse than him, so why do you keep targeting me? Are you a pig? Is there any benefit in targeting me? Learn from that Yi Xian. Although he's despicable and shameless most of the time, his brain really works. It's basically impossible for others to scheme against him. Most importantly, he's very good at fighting. If he were in the Tang clan, he would definitely be the best candidate for the heir." With that, she turned and left. In the same place, Tang Yi's expression was somewhat gloomy. At this moment, Tang Feng, who was not far away, suddenly walked in front of Tang Qing and said with a smile, "Congratulations, big sister, I have a treasure that just happens to be suitable for big sister. I hope big sister will accept it." Tang Yi coldly glanced at Tang Qing and Tang Feng, who were chatting and laughing not far away, and said indifferently, "I, Tang Yi, will never be a whetstone for others. P.S. Today's 2 updates, but I want tickets. Want monthly tickets. Want tickets." Chapter 590. Qingwu City. After Yi Xian returned to Divine Martial City, the current Divine Martial City was already in ruins. No matter if it was the Sword Sect or the Martial Academy, both had been completely destroyed in the battle from before. As for Wuyuan and Sword Sect, not only were their sects destroyed, but they also lost a lot of people. The Sword Sect master Yu Wuchen and Wu Wen had died in battle. Apart from the two of them, countless other Dao realm experts had also died in battle. In the ruins of Wuyuan, the Sword Sect and Wuyuan's people were all there, and all of them were looking at the young man not far away. This young man was Yi Xian. Behind Yi Xian were Lanxiu, Xia, Yunqi and the others. Presently, there were less than 200 people in the Martial Institution and Sword Sect combined. Amongst them, there were only 2 Dao verification realm experts left, and 1 each from the Martial Institution and Sword Sect. Moreover, there were only 5 knowledge realm experts left, and there were only 7 Dao realm experts. It could be said that Wuyuan and Sword Sect had suffered heavy losses. It was the worst and weakest time in history. After all, Wuyuan and Sword Sect had no trump cards, and they didn't even have a grand formation. In the battlefield, the disciples of Wuyuan and Sword Sect were looking at Yi Xian on the ruins. Especially the disciples of Sword Sect. After all, Yu Wuchen had handed the Sword Sect to Yi Xian before he died. Now only Yi Xian had the strength to lead the Sword Sect. In the hearts of all the swordsmen, Yi Xian was the sect master. Yi Xian looked around. It was a mess, and the pungent smell of blood was everywhere. Not far away on his right were corpses, and there were hundreds of them. These were the experts who had died in Wuyuan and Sword Sect. Yi Xian led the group to the pile of corpses. The first corpse belonged to Yu Wuchen. Yi Xian gazed at Yu Wuchen's corpse for a very long time. In the end he spoke softly, "Senior Yu, your blood will not be shed in vain, and your deaths will not be in vain." As he spoke he turned to the crowd behind him. "The Order Alliance will definitely not let us off because they will definitely eliminate us. However, what I want to say is that regardless of whether they let us off or not, Yi Xian will definitely not let them off. The blood of those who died today will not flow in vain. They will not die in vain. One day, I want the Order Alliance to be covered in rivers of blood. I want the Order Alliance to be littered with corpses. I want the Order Alliance to cease to exist in this world." Yi Xian's voice was like thunder, lingering in the ruins for a long time. After burying everyone, Yi Xian ordered the reconstruction of Wuyuan and Sword Sect. It is worth mentioning that Yi Xian became the Sword Sect sect master, and Wuyuan's dean was also Yi Xian. Initially Yi Xian wanted Enlanxio to be the sect master, but Enlanxio refused. Her reason was that Wuyuan and Sword Sect must stick together, and at this time having a leader was undoubtedly the best. Yi Xian didn't refuse. In this situation Wuyuan and Sword Sect needed to stick together. Otherwise, forget about revenge, they couldn't even rebuild Shenwu City. Yi Xian came to the back mountain of Wuyuan. At this time, Lian Wanli was lying on the ground. Her arms had recovered, but her injuries weren't fully healed. Lian Wanli sat on the mountain peak, looking at the distant horizon where a white cloud floated. Yi Xian sat beside Lian Wanli asking softly, "What are you thinking about?" Lian Wanli smiled, "War?" Yi Xian was silent. Lian Wanli continued, "From Qing province until now, there have been wars everywhere. Some are big, some are small, there are many, many are endless." Yi Xian asked, "Hate war?" Lian Wanli said softly, "Just hate people dying." Saying this she looked at Yi Xian. "That old man Wu is a good person and this place is also a good place." Yi Xian was silent. Lian Wanli said again, "You will avenge him, right?" Yi Xian nodded, "Definitely." Lian Wanli smiled, "Count me in." Yi Xian said, "Okay." Saying this he took out a few spiritual fruits and placed them in front of Lian Wanli. These healing fruits are very effective. This kind of healing fruit, basically everyone in Wuyuan and Sword Sect had one, and this time Xiaolingyue was rarely generous, she did not refuse Yi Xian's request. With these healing sacred fruits, the injuries of the disciples of the martial institution and sword faction recovered at a much, much faster pace. Lian Wanli did not refuse, immediately accepting the fruits. Yi Xian stood up and left. Lian Wanli suddenly said, "Have you thought of going back to Qingzhou to have a look?" "Qingzhou?" Yi Xian stopped in his tracks. An image of Mu Mu appeared in his mind, Qingqing Yi Clan, the place where he was born. There he suffered, cried but also laughed. After a long time Yi Xian smiled, "Busy." Saying this he quickly disappeared not far away. Yi Xian came to a quiet place, he sat cross-legged on the ground, then entered the prison pagoda. Yi Xian came to the second floor. At this time Yi Ling was healing. Previously in Wuyuan Yi Ling was also seriously injured, so after he sent Yi Ling to the prison pagoda, Yi Ling had been healing. Yi Xian did not disturb Yi Ling, he quietly left the second floor, then came to the fifth floor. Ayu glanced at Yi Xian, "What are you doing?" Yi Xian said softly, "Miss Ayu, please teach me how to use the remaining 2 Dao laws." Dao laws. In this battle he found that he was still a bit weak. These years he had been growing stronger, but at the same time his opponents were also getting stronger. Many times he also thought, when can he solve everything with a sword? In other words, when would he be able to solve everything with a single sword strike? He definitely could not do it now, but this was his goal. In the entire world, there was nothing in the world that couldn't be solved with a sword. Ayu looked at Yi Xian. After a short while she said, "Is there any benefit?" Yi Xian smiled, "What do you want?" Ayu said, "If the owner of the sword at the top of the pagoda appears again, I want them to do me a favor." Yi Xian asked, "What favor?" Ayu said, "Let me leave this pagoda." Yi Xian was about to speak. At this moment, the prison pagoda suddenly appeared in front of him, and then it quickly swayed left and right. Seeing this scene, Ayu went over and slapped it. Slap. The prison pagoda was directly slapped away. "Yi Xian," Ayu pointed angrily at the nearby prison pagoda, "You fool, if it wasn't for you how could we be so miserable? Now you want to stop me from regaining my freedom? Do you want to die?" The prison pagoda trembled slightly as if it was wronged. Ayu said angrily, "Who are you blaming? You blame yourself. If it wasn't for you roaming around, would we have become like this?" Big sister already told you that we can't beat those three, but you fool, you actually still want to fight them. It's fine if you fight them, but you still want to urge us to fight them. Why are you urging us to fight together? Why are you so stupid? At this point she looked at Yi Xian. Do you know how stupid he is? He clearly can't beat them, but he still wants to fight them. Moreover, he can't beat them, but he still doesn't want to run. My God, why is he so stupid? Why do we have such a stupid pig teammate? If he can't beat them, he doesn't even know how to run, but he still wants to die. How infuriating. As soon as she finished speaking, she seemed to be unable to contain her anger, and she immediately charged towards the prison pagoda. In next to no time, the prison pagoda was beaten up by Ayu, and it couldn't even fight back. It wasn't that it didn't want to control Ayu, but without Yi Xian's help, it couldn't control Ayu at all. A short while later, Ayu returned to Yi Xian, and the prison pagoda had already fled. This time, it learned to run if it couldn't beat them. As for who it learned from, it was obvious. Ayu looked at Yi Xian. I want to remove my restriction now, but you can't do it, but I can do it in the future. Of course, it doesn't matter if you do it or if you ask the master of the sword at the top of the pagoda to help me in the future, it's fine either way. Yi Xian said in a deep voice, Miss Ayu, is there a restriction in your body? Ayu said indifferently, my duty is to protect the 5th floor, but now that the 5th floor is dead. In any case, I don't want to stay here anymore, and I don't want to have such a stupid teammate. Yi Xian said, if you leave, will it affect this pagoda? Ayu said, yes, but it won't kill it and it can't kill it. Its true strength is in our Dao laws, but, at this point she didn't continue. At this time, the prison pagoda suddenly appeared in front of Ayu. It trembled slightly, clearly asking Ayu what was so powerful about it. Ayu raised her hand and slapped it, saying angrily, do you think I'm stupid enough to tell you? Bang. The prison pagoda was slapped away. Yi Xian was speechless. Meanwhile, Ayu looked at Yi Xian. In any case, I just want to regain my freedom. However, I won't be able to regain my freedom if I don't remove this restriction. Because if something happens to this pagoda, I'll be affected as well, and it'll be a huge one. Yi Xian thought about it and said, all right, I promise you. However, I hope that you can leave after it recovers some of its memories. Ayu looked Yi Xian in the eye. Do you think I'm very violent? Yi Xian hesitated for a moment and said, a little. Ayu said, it's much more violent than I am. Let me tell you, don't pity it now because you'll suffer once it recovers. Yi Xian was puzzled. Why? Ayu said indifferently, it won't submit to anyone besides master, not even big sister. As for you, it might beat you to death. Yi Xian smiled embarrassedly. I don't think it will, right? Ayu shrugged. It's up to you whether you believe me or not. However, I'll give you a suggestion. You should either send it out before it recovers or never allow it to recover. In any case, it's pretty good right now. Even though it's still stupid, it's easy to bully. Yi Xian was speechless. Ayu was about to speak when Yi Xian suddenly asked, who was the original owner of this pagoda? Was he powerful? Ayu fell silent when he heard this. Yi Xian asked softly, can't you tell me? Ayu shook his head and said, he was a very powerful person. He knew a lot of things. In any case, he was very powerful. Yi Xian asked, compared to the owner of the sword at the top of the pagoda, who's more powerful? Ayu fell silent. Chapter 591. The owner of the prison pagoda. Yi Xian was also very curious about this person. Although he did not know much about the prison pagoda from the people it imprisoned, it was enough to prove how terrifying it was. And the person who created the prison pagoda was definitely even more terrifying. So here came the question. Was the owner of the prison pagoda stronger or the owner of the sword at the top of the pagoda stronger? At this moment, Ayu suddenly said, why are you asking so many questions? Yi Xian smiled, I'm curious. Ayu said calmly, you just need to understand one thing. Yi Xian hurriedly asked, what? Ayu said, don't care if they are strong or not, you are very weak anyway. Yi Xian, Ayu said calmly, go outside, I will teach you how to use the Tao of space. Yi Xian hurriedly nodded, okay. Ayu brought Yi Xian to the back mountain of Wuyuan and looked down from the top of the mountain. Ayu looked down and said softly, actually, the 4th dimension is very good, why do those idiots want to go to the 5th dimension? Yi Xian said solemnly, isn't the 5th dimension good? Ayu said calmly, I can't say it's not good, I can only say that the 4th dimension is very good, why go to the 5th dimension? The moon in the 5th dimension is not as round as here, or do you humans always think that other places are better than your homeworld? Yi Xian said with a smile, No, in any case I think the fourth dimension is very good. Ayu looked up at the distant horizon and said softly, this world is always like this, many people want to come out with their lives and many people want to go in with their lives. How would mortals know that what they possess is what others yearn for even in their dreams? Hearing Ayu's words, Yi Xian fell silent. The fifth dimension might not be a good place. That's right, if it was a very good place, why would this lousy pagoda come out? No matter how he looked at it, it didn't look like it came out to play. Meanwhile, Ayu suddenly looked at Yi Xian. She waved her right hand lightly, and the spatial Tao Law within Yi Xian's body suddenly flew out and landed firmly in her palm. Ayu was instantly infuriated when he saw the spatial Tao Law. It's all because of that stupid pagoda. That idiot. Yi Xian was speechless. Ayu looked at Yi Xian. Can you play with the space? Yi Xian's expression was rather strange. Playing with space? Ayu said, it's the understanding of space. Yi Xian nodded. I understand, but compared to Miss Ayu she's definitely much worse. Ayu nodded. Although you're weak, you're not completely useless. It's alright, I'll teach you. With that, she waved her right hand. In an instant, the space around Yi Xian began to tremble. Yi Xian was puzzled. This is? Ayu asked, do you know what space is? Yi Xian hesitated for a moment before he said, what else could it be? Ayu shook her head. Uncultured people are truly terrifying. Yi Xian was speechless. An ancient book appeared in her grasp with a flip of her right hand. She opened it and read it for a while before she said, space is an objective form of existence that's opposite to time, but they're inseparable. According to the theory of the universe's dimensions, after the universe exploded, the state of the universe split apart from the initial one. That's why all things have different forms of existence. The difference in position between objects is called space, and the change in position is measured by time. Space is represented by length, width, height, and size. It usually refers to the four directions, up and down. When she spoke up to this point, she looked at Yi Xian. Do you understand? Yi Xian was dumbfounded. Ayu shook her head and sighed. It's truly terrifying to not study properly. As she spoke, she gazed at the ancient book in her hand and continued, let me give you a simple introduction. There are many types of space and the known ones are universal space, dimensional space, thought space. These three are all categories of space. Right now, the space you're in is dimensional space, and this dimensional space is divided into absolute space and relative space. Space is formed by different lines and the lines form different shapes. Within the lines is space. Space is a relative concept, and it forms the abstract concept of things. The abstract concept of things exists with reference to space. Your current level of control over space is only at the level of simple destruction. For example, you can use your strength to forcefully destroy this space. That's brute force and it can't be considered as controlling space. With that, she closed the ancient book and looked at Yi Xian. Do you understand? Yi Xian thought for a moment before he said, you said that space is formed by different lines. In other words, I can actually change these lines and cause chaos or reorganization in space. Ayu blinked and said, wait, let me take a look. After that, she opened the ancient book in her hand. Yi Xian was speechless. A short while later, Ayu looked at Yi Xian. In theory, you're right. However, it's not a simple matter. Because the spatial lines are protected by laws and Tao laws. That's why the Tao laws and laws of this world can immediately repair the space after you destroy it. Under normal circumstances, you wouldn't be able to destroy these laws and Tao laws because you're not as strong as the Tendo of this world. However, you have the spatial Tao law now. This spatial Tao law isn't a fourth-dimensional Tao law, but a fifth-dimensional Tao law. Yi Xian asked, can a fifth-dimensional Tao law control a fourth-dimensional Tao law? Wouldn't I be overstepping my authority? Ayu looked at Yi Xian and blinked as if she was thinking about this. After a short while, she opened the ancient book again. Yi Xian was speechless. A short while later, Ayu closed the ancient book and looked at Yi Xian. I won't overstep my authority. Yi Xian asked, why? Ayu said, whether it's the fourth dimension or the fifth dimension, it's within the scope of the universe. The fifth-dimensional Tao law is higher than the fourth-dimensional Tao law. Therefore, the fifth-dimensional Tao law can reverse the fourth dimension. Of course, you have to be careful because there's a Tendo in the fourth dimension, and you can't defeat a Tendo. Therefore, it's risky for you to reverse the fourth dimension because the Tendo might come after you. It's like if you suddenly seduce someone's wife, they'll definitely come after you. The corners of Yi Xian's mouth twitched. Can't you use a better analogy? Ayu continued, Now you can start by reorganizing the space. That is, you have to control these spatial lines and reorganize them. Yi Xian hurriedly asked, reorganizing the space? What's the use of that? Yu opened the ancient book. After reading for a while, she looked at Yi Xian. Space cut. With that, she looked to the right where there was an ancient tree. She opened her palm and in an instant, under Yi Xian's astonished gaze, the space where the ancient tree was suddenly distorted layer by layer. At the same time, the ancient tree soundlessly broke into countless pieces, and then mysteriously disappeared. Yu looked at Yi Xian. Reorganizing the space cut, and spatial teleportation. If you can master these three, you can easily erase a person from this space. You can start by reorganizing the space now. Yi Xian asked, how do I reorganize the space? Yu looked at the ancient book in her hand again. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly asked, can I have a look? Yu generously gave the ancient book to Yi Xian. When Yi Xian opened it, he was dumbfounded. He couldn't understand it. He had never seen the words in the ancient book before. Yi Xian smiled sheepishly and returned the ancient book to Yu. Then he asked, what book is this? Who wrote it? Yu said calmly, Spatial Theory. It was written by my former master. Yi Xian said, oh. Then he said, did your master write any other books? Yu said, master wrote too many books. One of them was called, oh I remember. It was called Cosmology. Big sister likes this book very much. With that she looked at Yi Xian. Don't waste time. Hurry up and learn it. I'll teach you. After that she looked at the ancient book in her hand. Spatial lines. You can't see them but you can feel them. Integrate your mind into the space and feel the spatial lines. Yi Xian didn't think much and hurriedly did as she said. Southern Wasteland World, Qin family. The Qin family was a subsidiary of the Tang family, but they betrayed the Tang family. Logically speaking, the Qin family should have disappeared from the world. However, unexpectedly, the Qin family was still alive and well. On this day, a middle-aged man suddenly appeared in the sky above the Qin family. This person was the Tang family's patriarch, Tang Yen. Tang Yen looked down at the Qin family below. Without any nonsense, he slammed his palm down. A powerful force crushed down on the Qin family below. Just as the force landed on the Qin family, it disappeared without a trace. At this time, Qin Zhong of the Qin family appeared in the courtyard. He looked up at Tang Yen and smiled. Since you're here, why don't you come down and have a seat? Tang Yen glanced at Qin Zhong, then turned and left. In the courtyard, Qin Zhong withdrew his gaze and fell silent. After a long time he turned and left. Eastern Wasteland World. The Eastern Wasteland World was also part of the chaotic universe, but this place had almost been forgotten by the people of the other three Wasteland Worlds. This was because the people of the Eastern Wasteland World had not set foot in the God Burial Plain for thousands of years. The God Burial Plain was a barren land. The sky was gray all year round, and the spiritual chi was thin. There wasn't even an ant, let alone a human. In the center of the God Burial Plain stood an iron pillar that was dozens of meters long. A middle-aged man hung on the iron pillar. The middle-aged man hung on the iron pillar, his long hair covering his face. At this time, a little girl of about 16 years old walked over slowly with an old man. The little girl wore a simple white silk robe. Her features were as beautiful as a painting. Although she was young, she was already devastatingly beautiful. A sheathed long sword hung from her waist. Her brows were as sharp as swords and her eyes were cold. Her peerless features carried an aura that looked down on the world. The little girl walked to the bottom of the pillar and looked up at it. Is this the Gu Tatian who stopped my divine nation from advancing west all those years ago? Behind her, the old man bowed slightly. Not really. The little girl remained expressionless and waited quietly for the old man to continue. The old man pointed into the distance. There was a bottomless fissure there that stretched across the entire God Burial Plain. The fissure was as smooth as a mirror, as if it had been cut by a sharp sword. The old man opened his palm and a crystal ball appeared in his hand. In the next moment, a strand of dazzling blue light erupted from the crystal ball, and it didn't take long for a screen of water to appear in the sky. God Burial Plains was within that screen of water. On the right was a middle-aged man in purple armor. He held a spear and his eyes were as deep as the starry sky. Behind him was a million-strong divine nation army. A black Xiaota floated in front of the army. A woman in a plain dress stood on top of the Xiaota. She held a sword in her hand and drew a line on the ground with her right hand. In an instant, a sword mark that was so wide that one could not see the end of it The plain-clothed woman pointed her sword at the sword scar. Realm Crosser die. The middle-aged man on the right looked at the woman expressionlessly. He pointed his spear at Gutatian, who was hanging on the iron pillar not far away. This is your fate. Kill. With that, the million-strong army charged forward. Chapter 592. Seeing the army of 1,000,000 rushing over, the woman in the plain dress above the black shoutai expressionlessly slashed down with her sword. A ray of sword light descended from the sky. Before the million-strong army could react, their heads fell to the ground in an orderly manner. In the blink of an eye, there were millions of corpses on the ground. One sword, 1,000,000 corpses. As for the middle-aged man leading the group, his physical body had already disappeared, leaving behind only his soul. Not only that, his soul was becoming more and more illusory. The middle-aged man looked at the woman in the plain dress blankly. Are you a god? The woman in the plain dress smirked. Can a deity withstand my sword? As soon as she finished speaking, she turned around and entered the black shouta. In next to no time, the black shouta vanished into the boundless horizon. The middle-aged man disappeared, and the image abruptly stopped. The old man put the crystal ball away and said softly, My divine nation lost all its elites in that battle all those years ago. If Gutatian's corpse hadn't suppressed the Order Alliance and the other forces, my divine nation would have probably vanished from this world as well. When he spoke up to this point, he looked at Gutatian's corpse and said softly, Everyone in the world thinks that it was Gutatian who forced the god race to retreat, but how could they know that the real person who stopped the god race was the woman in a plain dress who was even stronger than a god? A woman in a plain dress. At this moment, the little girl suddenly walked over to the mark, and the sword on her waist started to tremble violently. Sword intent. The sword mark on the ground contained a sword intent that hadn't dissipated even after 1,000 years. At this moment, the old man's expression suddenly changed. Do not approach. The little girl raised her right hand and gestured for the old man to step back. The old man did not dare to disobey and immediately retreated to the side. The little girl slowly walked towards the sword will, and the sword will grew stronger and stronger. It had already targeted her. The little girl's expression did not change. She continued to walk forward, and the sword at her waist began to tremble violently, as if it was about to be unsheathed. The little girl pressed down on the sheath with her left hand and continued forward. It didn't take long for her to arrive before the mark. Meanwhile, the sword intent suddenly transformed into a sword that slashed towards her. The little girl's expression didn't change. She suddenly took a step forward, drew her sword and slashed. A wisp of sword light slashed down. Extraordinary sword saint. This sword strike directly exposed the little girl's strength. A 16-year-old transcendent sword saint. The little girl's sword slashed at the sword will. In an instant she retreated. However, she quickly charged forward again. This time she didn't attack. Instead, she allowed the sword will to stand on top of her head. Not far away, the old man's expression changed drastically, but he was soon dumbfounded. Because the sword intent was directly absorbed by the little girl. The little girl stood there, the sword at her waist trembling violently, and the sword intent flowed endlessly into the little girl's body. About 15 minutes later, the little girl suddenly pulled out her long sword. Buzz! A sword cry soared into the sky, straight into the clouds. At this moment, this sword intent covered the entire starry sky. At this moment, the little girl's sword Dao went from saintly to godly. The sword mark on the ground also disappeared. After a long time, the little girl turned around and left. Pass down my order. Summon all the kings and 26 saints to see me. The old man quietly retreated. Northern Wasteland Domain Order Alliance. Inside the hall, the Star Lord sat quietly with an ancient book in his hand. There was only one person in the hall, Master Ku. Master Ku said softly, Our best choice now is to wait and see. The Star Lord didn't say anything. Master Ku continued, Of course we can't let Yi Xian grow. The Star Lord looked at Master Ku. Continue. Master Ku said in a deep voice, The Tang clan. If we can stop the Tang clan from interfering, we can easily destroy Yi Xian and Shenwu City. The Star Lord shook his head. The Tang clan will definitely interfere. Master Ku nodded. Then let someone else restrain the Tang clan. The Star Lord frowned. The Monster clan? Master Ku nodded. If the Monster clan can restrain the Tang clan, it'll be easy for us to kill Yi Xian. The Star Lord shook his head. The Monster clan is ambitious. If we ask them to help, we'll have to pay a huge price. Moreover, the Monster clan is a foreign race. We can't trust them. Master Ku said in a deep voice, "This is our only choice." The Star Lord said softly, "Let me think about it." Master Ku nodded slightly and left the room without saying anything else. In the hall, the Star Lord remained silent for a long time before he finally stood up and left. Shenwu City. Under the joint efforts of Wu Yuan and the Sword Sect, 5 to 6 cities had been restored. After all, they weren't ordinary people. It was undoubtedly a simple matter for them to build a city. However, because of the Order Alliance, the aristocratic families and merchants in the city had either died or left. Now, the entire city was empty except for the disciples of the Sword Sect and Wu Yuan. No, there's still one force that hasn't left, the Treasure Trade Union. Not only did they not leave, but they also gave a lot of support to Wu Yuan and the Sword Sect in building the Shenwu City. Otherwise, it would be quite difficult for the city to be built so quickly. On this day, Baiji from the Treasure Trade Union came to the Sword Sect and sat quietly in a hall that had yet to be built. After some time, a man walked into the hall. It was Yi Xian. Yi Xian walked to Baiji and sat opposite her. He smiled apologetically. "I'm sorry to have made you wait for so long." Baiji smiled. "It's nothing." Yi Xian smiled. "Miss Baiji, you must have something to tell me today, right?" Baiji nodded. "I have something to discuss with you." Yi Xian said, "Please speak." Baiji said, "There are many things waiting to be done in the Shenwu City. Do you have any ideas?" Yi Xian smiled and said, "Miss Baiji, don't beat around the bush with me. Just tell me what you're here for." Baiji nodded. "I have an idea. I want to start a new trade union here." Yi Xian said solemnly, "Miss Baiji, you must think this through. There's basically no one in the Shenwu City now. Not only that, but the Order Alliance might make a comeback at any time. At that time, your trade union will suffer great losses." Baiji smiled. "Of course I know that." Yi Xian was puzzled. "Why do you still want to come?" Baiji said, "I have an idea. You can listen to it. You can use your status as the Shenwu City Lord to invite the Tang Clan, the Monster Clan, and some other forces here. You can allow them to establish their own trade unions or forces here. Of course they will have to pay rent. You can rent the land to them for a certain period." Yi Xian frowned. "They will come." Baiji smiled. "Definitely. Because there's a divine vein here. That divine vein still exists beneath the Shenwu City. This is a holy land for cultivation. Many martial artists are willing to come here. And as long as people come, those forces will definitely settle here because of the benefits. For example, the Tang Clan. The Tang Clan's young masters and Miss Tang Qing all have their own private army. What do they need to raise a private army? They need money. And the Shenwu City is such a good place. If you open it to the public, they will definitely be tempted. Not only the Tang Clan but the Monster Clan as well. Although the Monster Clan doesn't meddle with our affairs, some of their merchants are active outside. In the past, the Shenwu City didn't allow those big forces to come here. But now, if you open it to the public, they will definitely come." Yi Xian said solemnly, "Once they come, the Shenwu City will be everyone's Shenwu City." The 100 Tribes Alliance nodded. At that time, even if the Order Alliance wants to take action, they will only dare to target you, the Sword Sect, and Wu Yuan. They won't dare to target the Shenwu City. Of course, if you are strong enough and can unite these forces as long as the benefits are sufficient, it's not impossible for them to resist the Order Alliance with you. Moreover, with these forces joining in, outsiders will feel relieved. At that time, more people will come to the Shenwu City. Yi Xian thought about it and nodded. "It's indeed a good idea." Then he looked at Baiji. "Miss Baiji, please choose a place. 10 years of rent-free." He was naturally grateful to Baiji. She had helped him a lot in the past. Baiji smiled. "I won't refuse." Yi Xian smiled. "There's one more thing I need to trouble you with. How much rent do you think is appropriate?" Baiji thought about it and said, "This needs to be discussed." Yi Xian nodded. "I'll find someone to discuss with you." Then he transmitted his voice with his mystic qi. A moment later, a woman came in. This person was Jiang Jiao. Jiang Jiao glanced at Yi Xian. "What's the matter?" Yi Xian nodded. "Little Jiao, I want you to be the chief steward of the Shenwu City. You will be in charge of everything in the Shenwu City. In short, you can discuss with Miss Baiji." Then he stood up and left. Baiji shook her head and smiled. "Take charge." Jiang Jiao looked at Baiji. The latter said in a low voice, "Miss Jiang, you need to write a letter to those big forces in the name of young Master Yi. Sincerely invite them to the Shenwu City. Come, I'll tell you which forces you need to invite. The first is the Tang Clan, the Monster Clan, and While the two of them were discussing, Yi Xian had returned to the mountain behind the sword sect. At the peak of the mountain, Ayu stood there silently while a tiny void character floated above her palm. It was the Space Dao Law. Yi Xian walked over to Ayu's back and the latter said, "You've more or less grasped the theoretical knowledge of space so you can put it into practice. However, you can't utilize the Space Dao Law during practice. Otherwise it would be equivalent to cheating." Yi Xian nodded and then he calmed down. It didn't take long for the space around him to start trembling gradually. Ayu just watched Yi Xian from the side and she corrected him from time to time. Around an hour later, the space in front of Yi Xian suddenly folded. The folded space seemed extremely strange because the scene within the folded space was abstract, and it was extremely strange. Around another 2 hours later, the space in front of Yi Xian started to move swiftly. Reorganization. The space in front of Yi Xian was reorganizing strangely. The scene was indescribable with words. P.S. Many readers have tipped me recently and many readers have silently voted for me. You could have chosen to read the pirated version but you didn't. Not only did you read the original version, but you also spent money to tip me. A straightforward person doesn't beat around the bush. Are you interested in me? Chapter 593. Spatial Reconstruction. Under Ayu's guidance, Yi Xian didn't use Space Dao Law and could use those spatial lines to reconstruct space. However, it was a little slow and obviously wouldn't work against an enemy. Fortunately, this was just the beginning. Soon, under Yi Xian's control, the space around him began to form all sorts of strange shapes. Not only that, but he could also use spatial cutting to directly decompose the matter and energy in the space. This was so lethal that even he was a little apprehensive. Spatial cutting technique. This was actually an ancient secret technique. Just like that, Yi Xian cultivated crazily every day in the sword sect's back mountain. Under Jiang Jiao and Baiji's operation, some forces and cultivators gradually entered Xinwu City. After all, there were divine veins here, which was very suitable for cultivation. However, not many people came over because they were still wary of the Lawful Order Alliance. No one knew when the Lawful Order Alliance would attack. Therefore, many people were still waiting and watching. On this day, Tang Clan's eldest daughter suddenly announced that she would enter Xinwu City. This news caused an uproar. Tang Clan entered Xinwu City? Tang Clan was a top force. They actually entered Xinwu City. What did this mean? At this time, the demon race also entered Xinwu City. Although it wasn't announced publicly, the news spread. The demon race entered Xinwu City. This caused an uproar. The demon race, Tang Clan, and Xinwu City formed an alliance. Now this was circulating outside. Therefore, more and more people entered Xinwu City. Moreover, some forces of the surrounding star fields also began to enter Xinwu City. After these people entered Xinwu City, it became more and more lively, even more so than before. Because in the past, Xinwu City wasn't completely open to the public. But now it was completely open to the public. Therefore, more and more people entered Xinwu City. However, to establish a foothold in Xinwu City, one had to rent land. What surprised Yi Xian was that many people rented land, and some good places were rented by Jiang Jiao in the form of auctions. Some good places were immediately snatched up. All in all, Xinwu City's current development momentum was very good. And the sword sect's disciples and Wuyuan students also got along very well because they had experienced life and death together. While Xinwu City was developing, the Lawful Order Alliance didn't make any moves. Back mountain of the sword sect. Yi Xian was still madly studying space. Under Ayu's guidance, his understanding and mastery of the Tao of space had advanced by leaps and bounds. During this period of time, he hadn't used the Space Tao Law at all. According to Ayu, if he were to use the Space Tao Law now, it would be like using an external object. Only after thoroughly comprehending the Space Tao and adding this Tao Law would he be able to fully unleash the power of the Space Tao Law. Moreover, this was the only way to minimize the backlash he would suffer. Half a month passed. On this day, Yi Xian sat cross-legged on the edge of a cliff. Not far in front of him, Ayu stood silently. Besides Ayu, there was also Yi Ling. At this time, Yi Ling's injuries had completely recovered. Not only that, but she also cultivated with Ayu every day. Ayu seemed to favor Yi Ling very much and frequently guided her. Under Ayu's guidance, Yi Ling's cultivation advanced by leaps and bounds. Right at this moment, the space in front of Yi Xian suddenly started to be sliced apart. The space seemed as if it had been sliced by a sharp blade, and numerous long cracks appeared on it. This wasn't a cut caused by an external force, but a spatial cut instead. There was a huge difference in essence. and the difference in might was like the difference between the heavens and the earth. Ayu looked at Yi Xian and nodded slightly. It's not bad. You can use the Space Dao Law now. As she spoke, she flicked her finger and the Space Dao Law flew over to Yi Xian. Yi Xian looked at Ayu. Miss Ayu, I feel that it's the same even without the Space Dao Law now. Confidence. In his opinion, his attainments in the Tao of space were already very deep. So, he was extremely confident. Ayu sneered. Confidence is a good thing, but overconfidence might be a bad thing. Yi Xian smiled. Alright, then I'll give the Space Dao Law a try. As soon as he finished speaking, he opened his palm, and the Space Dao Law suddenly fell into his palm. Yi Xian gazed at Ayu. Miss Ayu, how do I use it? Ayu said, activate it. Yi Xian nodded. His profound energy surged as he activated the Space Dao Law. In next to no time, the Space Dao Law transformed into a ray of white light that entered the space between his brows. Meanwhile, Ayu's voice resounded. Sense it. Yi Xian hurriedly sensed the space around him. Suddenly his expression changed, because he noticed that the space around him was extremely clear, and it was at least 10 times clearer than before. Moreover, he felt that space was intimate to him as he sensed it. Intimate. This wasn't present in the past at all. Ayu suddenly said, try controlling this space. Yi Xian hurriedly nodded when he heard this, and then he started to control the space around him. It didn't take long for the space before him to reform at an extremely swift speed, and it was so swift that Yi Xian was stunned on the spot. It was at least 10 times faster. Not only that, because when he manipulated these spatial lines, there were no obstructions. He was like the master of this space. This feeling was too wonderful. Yi Xian did not stop. He began to use spatial slash again. Just as this thought rose in his mind, hundreds of spatial cracks suddenly appeared in the space in front of him. Spatial laceration. Yi Xian was stunned. Right at this moment, Ayu added, you can even utilize space to form spatial barriers. Yi Xian stretched out his right hand when he heard this, and then he clenched it lightly. As soon as he did this, the space before him started to shrink layer by layer. In practically an instant, the space before him had condensed into a spatial barrier, and it was so thick that it shocked him. It was so thick that even a Tao-confirming expert wouldn't be able to move it. Of course, this was the contribution of the spatial Tao law. Under normal circumstances, these spaces wouldn't be able to do this. Could be said that the space Tao law strengthened these spaces and made them even more powerful. Ayu said indifferently, does it feel the same? Yi Xian spoke in a low voice, Miss Ayu, the spatial Tao law is so powerful. Powerful? Ayu laughed coldly, you can only say that you've grasped a tiny bit of it. The path of space is boundless and very few are able to fully grasp it. If you can fully grasp it, then you can directly change the space in this universe with a single thought, and it's even to the extent that space within this universe can be reorganized. Yi Xian was stunned and then he said, really? Ayu spoke indifferently, you'll need at least 10,000 years to accomplish what I just said. So give up. Because you won't be able to live for 10,000 years. Yi Xian spoke in a low voice, why can't I live for 10,000 years? Ayu gazed at Yi Xian, once that stupid pagoda within you recovers its consciousness, it'll definitely kill you first. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment and said, it probably won't. Ayu laughed coldly and remained silent. Yi Xian suddenly said, why don't I kill it first? Ayu was speechless. Meanwhile, the pagoda suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian. Yi Xian was about to speak when the pagoda smashed towards him. Yi Xian turned around and ran. I was joking. I was joking. Yi Ling covered her mouth and chuckled as she watched Yi Xian being chased around. Right at this moment, a shadow suddenly appeared in the sky above Yi Ling, and then it shot explosively towards Yi Ling. Ayu flared up with rage, you dare attack while I'm still here? Do I look very weak? Chapter 594. As soon as she finished speaking, Ayu suddenly vanished on the spot. Bang. As soon as Ayu vanished, the afterimage shot out, and it flew over 1 kilometer away. As soon as it stopped, the space around it condensed into a spatial cage that trapped it within it. It was a black-clothed figure. Yi Xian appeared before the black-clothed figure, and the latter laughed savagely, Yi Xian I'm... Meanwhile Yi Xian raised his hand and swung his sword. The black-clothed figure's head instantly flew into the air. The head fell slowly to the ground, and its eyes were wide open and filled with astonishment. Yi Xian sheathed his sword and said, you talk too much. Ayu gazed at Yi Xian and said, aren't you going to ask who sent him? Yi Xian spoke indifferently, it's not important. Ayu asked, why? Yi Xian's face was expressionless as he said, no matter who sent him, so long as he dares to send someone, then I dare to kill him. Ayu thought for a moment and said, I've noticed something and I don't know if I should tell you. Yi Xian asked, what is it? Ayu gazed at Yi Xian and said, I suddenly thought of something. In the future you won't just have to face experts from the fourth dimension, you'll have to face experts from the fifth dimension as well. Yi Xian was stunned. What? Ayu spoke indifferently, because you have a treasure. Yi Xian spoke in a low voice, the prison pagoda? Ayu nodded. Do you know the true function of this stupid pagoda? Yi Xian shook his head. Ayu spoke softly, there's something that everyone wants to obtain in this stupid pagoda. Even Big Sister coveted it all those years ago. Of course everyone wants it. Yi Xian asked, what is it? Ayu gazed at Yi Xian and said, I won't tell you. Yi Xian was speechless. Ayu continued, I won't tell you. As soon as she finished speaking, she led Yi Ling back to the prison pagoda. She wanted to personally train Yi Ling. Yi Xian was speechless. After a while, Yi Xian continued to study the Space Dao Law. At this moment he finally realized how terrifying the Space Dao Law was. This was definitely more terrifying than a Dao realm treasure. If used well, its power could really destroy the heavens and earth. As for the Dream Dao Law, Yi Xian didn't choose to study it because he still hadn't fully understood the Space Dao Law. Biting off more than one can chew. Other than researching the Dao Law of space, Yi Xian was also getting the members of the sword sect to prepare a sword for him. Breakthrough to the next realm. His current battle prowess was actually based on the superposition of all things, and his own realm was very low. This was his greatest weakness. In short, what he needed to do now was to settle down. Order Alliance. At this time in the main hall, the experts of the Order Alliance were arguing. The topic of discussion was Yi Xian. The current divine martial city's development momentum was too good. If this continued, it would be extremely disadvantageous to the Order Alliance. Especially that Yi Xian. It could be said that the Order Alliance wouldn't be able to eat and sleep in peace if the monster Yi Xian was still alive. The reason why there was such a huge debate was that they would have to face the Tang clan if they wanted to kill Yi Xian. Moreover, if the Astral Lord couldn't do anything, almost no one in the Order Alliance could kill Yi Xian. Suddenly an old man stood out and said ferociously, Astral Lord, Yi Xian can't be left alive. I suggest we use the Divine Dao Army. The Star Lords narrowed their eyes when they heard that. Meanwhile, Master Cuckoo suddenly roared furiously, how dare you? The old man's expression changed slightly, but he didn't back down. Instead he continued, Astral Lord, Master Cuckoo, Yi Xian is a threat to the Order Alliance. The Astral Lord suddenly shook his head. Stand down. The old man's expression was quite ugly. He didn't dare to say anything else and left. The Astral Lord slowly closed his eyes. Even if the Realm Defense Alliance is destroyed, we can't use this army. Everyone in the hall fell silent. The Divine Dao Army. The Order Alliance's greatest trump card. At this moment, Master Cuckoo suddenly said, there's something strange about the Qin clan. I've sent people to investigate, but all of them disappeared without a trace. The Astral Lord looked at Master Cuckoo and the latter said, someone's behind them. After a moment of silence, the Astral Lord said, I'll take responsibility for this personally. Master Cuckoo suddenly asked, what about Yi Xian and the Shenwu city? The Astral Lord fell silent. Master Cuckoo continued, this person can't be left alive, or it'll be difficult to deal with him in the future. The Astral Lord said, I'll make a trip to the Demon Clan. The Demon Clan. Master Cuckoo nodded. It was obvious that the Astral Lord had decided to seek help from the Demon Clan. As long as the Demon Clan could restrain Tang Yen, it would be very easy to eliminate Yi Xian. Just when the Astral Lord was about to leave, he suddenly raised his head and looked into the distance. A dragon's roar could be heard from the horizon. Inside the hall, everyone turned to look outside the hall. Outside the hall, a giant dragon soared over, and on the back of the giant dragon stood a man. A Divine Dao soldier. Soon, the giant dragon stopped in the sky above the Order Alliance, and the man on the giant dragon descended. He quickly walked to the Astral Lord, but he did not kneel down. Instead he bowed slightly. Astral Lord, the Theocracy has invaded. The Theocracy had invaded. All the experts of the Order Alliance were petrified when they heard that. Almost at the same time, a Divine Dao soldier arrived at the Tang clan. The Divine Dao soldier descended from the sky above the Tang clan and bowed slightly to Tang Yen. Patriarch Tang, the Theocracy has invaded. The Theocracy. Tang Yen and the rest were dumbfounded when they heard that. In the distant demon clan, an old man was sitting in front of a cave. He lay on a wooden chair and held a scroll in his hand. On the scroll there were 4 words, Yi Xian's information. As he read, the old man said softly, the theocracy's guardian beast. Dragon soul. At this moment, a divine Dao soldier appeared in the sky above the demon clan. No one stopped him because he was riding a giant dragon. Moreover, no one dared to stop him. The divine Dao soldier landed in front of the old man and bowed slightly. Your Excellency, Demon King, the theocracy has invaded. The theocracy had invaded. The old man narrowed his eyes. After a moment he nodded slightly. Understood. In the distant northern wasteland world, in an unknown small city, a middle-aged man sat by the river and fished. There was a small wooden bucket beside him. Not far away from him, a woman was also fishing. This person was Zhao Mu. At this moment, the middle-aged man suddenly pulled on his fishing rod. In an instant, a fish flew out of the river and landed steadily in a wooden bucket beside Zhao Mu. The middle-aged man laughed heartily and looked at Zhao Mu, who was not far away. Little girl, are you feeling bored? Zhao Mu did not speak. The middle-aged man smiled. Fishing is also cultivation. It cultivates the heart. If the heart is calm, everything will be clear. Zhao Mu nodded slightly. Then she grabbed a fish from the river with her right hand. The middle-aged man. At this moment, Zhao Mu released the 2 fish into the river. But soon she grabbed them with her right hand again. But after playing with them for a while, she put them down again. The fish. At this moment, there was a dragon's roar in the sky. Hearing this, the middle-aged man frowned. He looked up at the sky and saw a giant dragon flying over. Soon, the giant dragon arrived in the sky and a divine Dao soldier landed. He came before the middle-aged man and bowed slightly, his expression very respectful. Master Wu, the theocracy has invaded. The theocracy had invaded. The middle-aged man frowned. Is the news accurate? The divine Dao soldier nodded. After a moment of silence, the middle-aged man said, Understood. The divine Dao soldier bowed again and quietly retreated. Nearby, Zhao Mu put down the 2 fish and looked at the middle-aged man. The middle-aged man said softly, The world has changed. On a certain mountain range in the southern wasteland world, a skinny old man sat silently. Suddenly he opened his eyes. In the clouds in the sky, a giant dragon was flying over. The scrawny old man furrowed his brows. He stood up and took a step forward. With this step, he arrived directly in front of the dragon. At this moment, the dragon was still flying. Therefore, the force of impact was extremely powerful. The skinny old man pressed down lightly with his right hand, and the giant dragon was forced to stop on the spot. The giant dragon looked at the skinny old man with dense fear in its eyes. On the back of the giant dragon, the divine Dao soldier hurriedly flew down. He came before the skinny old man and bowed respectfully. Perfected Master Chu. Perfected Master Chu. One of the 6 supreme experts of the current era. Perfected Master Chu looked at the divine Dao soldier. Did the Order Alliance summon you back to deal with that Yi Xian? His voice was calm, but it made one shudder. The divine Dao soldier shook his head. No, the theocracy has invaded. The theocracy had invaded. Perfected Master Chu instantly frowned when he heard this. After a moment he nodded slightly. Understood. The divine Dao soldier bowed slightly and retreated. Perfected Master Chu raised his head and looked at the end of the horizon. There was a trace of worry in his eyes. Theocracy. So many years had passed. How strong was this mysterious country now? No one knew. Because no one dared to step into this mysterious country. Even the 6 supreme experts didn't dare to step into God Burial Plain. After a moment, Perfected Master Chu turned and looked at the thatched cottage not far away. Iron Bull, let's go. After that, a tall and sturdy youth walked out of the thatched cottage. Perfected Master Chu brought the youth and disappeared not far away. On the way, the tall and sturdy youth asked, Master, is the theocracy very strong? Perfected Master Chu said, Yes. The tall and sturdy youth grinned. Then there will definitely be a lot of fights. Perfected Master Chu said, Not only will there be a lot of fights but many people will also die. Shenwu City. On this day, a dragon's roar suddenly sounded from the distant horizon. In the next moment, a giant dragon flew over from the horizon. Within Shenwu City, countless people looked at the horizon. At this moment, the giant dragon had already arrived above Shenwu City. On the giant dragon's back, the divine Dao soldier looked down. Are the Wuyuan Dean and Sword Sect Master here? At this moment, a youth appeared in front of the giant dragon. The giant dragon looked at Yi Xian, its eyes filled with caution. Yi Xian glanced at the giant dragon and then at the divine Dao soldier. You are? The divine Dao soldier looked at Yi Xian. You are? Yi Xian said, I am the Sword Sect Master and Wuyuan Dean. The divine Dao soldier was stunned. He sized up Yi Xian and then said, Sir, the theocracy has invaded. The theocracy had invaded? Yi Xian was slightly stunned. That's a good thing, the divine Dao soldier. Chapter 595. Good thing? The divine Dao soldier in front of Yi Xian was dazed. Yi Xian was about to speak when Tang Qing suddenly appeared next to Yi Xian. She looked at the divine Dao soldier. We know. We will arrange it as soon as possible. The divine Dao soldier nodded and left on the dragon. After it left, Tang Qing stared at Yi Xian. Do you want to die? Yi Xian was confused. What do you mean? Tang Qing said, Do you know what the divine Dao soldier is? Yi Xian shook his head. No. Tang Qing said softly, The divine Dao soldier is an army created by all the forces. Moreover, it wasn't created recently. It has been around for thousands of years. On this continent, many forces have disappeared, but the divine Dao soldier has never disappeared. Not only that, there are also experts from Wuyuan and Sword Sect. Yi Xian frowned. An army created by all the forces? What are they used for? Tang Qing said, To fight against theocracy. Then she looked to the east and said softly, That mysterious nation from the eastern wasteland domain. Then she looked at Yi Xian. Are you thinking that theocracy's invasion is a good thing for you? Yi Xian nodded. Indeed. Tang Qing said, If that's what you think, then you really aren't far from death. Yi Xian was confused. Why? Tang Qing said, Fighting against theocracy is everyone's responsibility. If you don't resist and even try to sneak attack the Order Alliance, then all the forces will work together to get rid of you first. Including my Tang clan, we will definitely work together with the Order Alliance to get rid of you first. Because at a time like this, all grudges must be put down. No one is allowed to cause internal strife. Yi Xian was silent. Tang Qing continued, When theocracy invades, all the forces will be purged. Under such circumstances, all the forces must unite against them. In the past, the powers of the continent had made an alliance called the Offensive and Defensive Alliance. Back then, all the forces participated in this alliance, including the Sword Sect and Wuyuan. Not only that, but every 5 years they would send experts to God Burial Plain. Yi Xian said in a deep voice, Can't I refuse? Tang Qing shook his head. At this time, whoever causes internal strife will die first. As long as you don't take the initiative to cause trouble, the Order Alliance definitely won't dare to target you. If they do, the other forces and the higher-ups won't agree either. At this point, she looked straight at Yi Xian. If you don't want to be targeted by everyone, you must participate. Once you participate with your current strength and reputation, the higher-ups will definitely agree. Not only that, they won't let the Order Alliance target you. If you choose not to participate, the Order Alliance will instigate you, and I can be sure that all the forces will join hands to deal with you first because you are too dangerous. Moreover, they are afraid that you will seek refuge with God Nation. Therefore, you must declare your position as soon as possible. You have no choice. Because you are too dangerous, if you don't declare your position, everyone will be afraid that you will seek refuge with the God race. Yi Xian nodded slightly, I understand. At this time, he was a little surprised because he didn't expect these forces to join hands to form an army. Moreover, the Sword Sect and Wuyuan both participated. Their purpose was to fight against God Nation. God Nation. He knew very little about this nation, only that 1,000 years ago, God Nation invaded. And he had no idea how powerful this nation was. At this time, a figure suddenly appeared above the two of them. That figure said, Sect Leader Yi, God Nation is invading. The Star Lord invites Sect Leader Yi to Ascending Heaven City for a discussion. The Star Lord invites you. Yi Xian smiled, Let's go. That figure nodded slightly and turned to leave. Yi Xian looked at Tang Qing. Miss Tang Qing, I'll have to trouble you to take care of the matters in the city. Tang Qing looked straight at Yi Xian. Don't act recklessly. Yi Xian smiled. Do I look like a reckless person to you? Ah. With that, he turned and disappeared into the distant horizon. Tang Qing looked at Yi Xian in the sky, a trace of worry in her eyes. Not long after, Yi Xian arrived at Ascending Heaven City. As soon as he arrived, several powerful auras locked onto him. So strong. Yi Xian's heart skipped a beat. These auras were not weaker than the Star Lord. Yi Xian's expression was calm. He came to ascending heaven hall. In front of the hall he saw a familiar person. Zhao Mu. Zhao Mu leaned against the wall, her arms crossed, her eyes narrowed. Yi Xian waved at Zhao Mu, chuckling, "So it's Miss Zhao. I almost didn't recognize you when you wore your clothes." Speaking up to hear, he suddenly froze. What did he say? At this time Zhao Mu, who was not far away, suddenly opened her eyes. The next moment she disappeared. Yi Xian's expression changed slightly. His arms fiercely blocked in front of him. Bang! With a muffled sound, Yi Xian directly retreated hundreds of zhang. Zhao Mu wanted to make another move, but at this time, a voice sounded from inside the hall. "Girl," Zhao Mu stopped. She glanced at Yi Xian, who was not far away, and then raised her fist. Yi Xian smiled awkwardly. "It's a misunderstanding. I didn't mean anything else. I just spoke too quickly." Zhao Mu ignored Yi Xian. She retreated to the side, continuing to lean against the wall. Not far away, a man suddenly looked at Yi Xian. "You're Yi Xian?" Yi Xian looked over. The one who spoke was a burly man. The man's figure was extremely burly. His muscles bulged, filled with explosive power. Yi Xian nodded. "That's me." The man sized up Yi Xian. "I think you're just a pretty boy. Why did Master say you're very powerful?" "Pretty boy?" Himself. Yi Xian was about to speak, but at this time, a voice sounded from inside the hall. "Come in." Yi Xian cupped his fists at the burly man, then walked into the hall. There were 5 people in the hall. Among them the Star Lord was the leader. He also knew one of them. It was Tang Yen. As for the others, they were the Demon King, the Southern Sect's Martial Master, and Perfected Chu. After Yi Xian walked into the hall, he slightly bowed to Tang Yen and the others. "Greetings, seniors." Yi Xian bowed. This caused Tang Yen and the others to be slightly taken aback. Bowing? The Star Lord glanced at Yi Xian but did not speak. At this time, the Southern Sect's Martial Master laughed. "It's indeed rare to have such strength at such a young age." Yi Xian slightly bowed. "Senior, you flatter me. Compared to Senior's disciple, this junior is far inferior." The Southern Sect's Martial Master laughed. "You're quite humble." At the side, Perfected Chu suddenly said, "What do you think about the Kingdom of God's invasion?" Hearing this, the gazes of everyone present descended onto Yi Xian. The Star Lord silently looked at Yi Xian and did not speak. The atmosphere in the surroundings had become slightly strange. Words that struck a chord. Just as Tang Qing had said, they hoped to obtain Yi Xian's help, but they were afraid of Yi Xian. They were afraid that he would join the Kingdom of God's side because of the Alliance of Order. Once Yi Xian joined the Kingdom of God's side, it would definitely be extremely disadvantageous to them. Therefore to them Yi Xian was either on their side or be killed to prevent him from betraying them. At this moment Yi Xian suddenly said, "What else can I think about when the Kingdom of God is invading? Of course I'll kill them." Perfected Chu looked at Yi Xian and did not speak. Yi Xian continued, "Everyone, I am the Dean of Wuyuan, the sect leader of the Sword Sect, and now the City Lord of Shenwu City. Since the Kingdom of God is invading, how can I escape unscathed? Therefore my idea is to kill them." But at this point he suddenly stopped. Perfected Chu asked, "But what?" Yi Xian said indifferently, "I'm afraid." Perfected Chu frowned slightly. "Afraid of the Kingdom of God?" Yi Xian shook his head and said, "Afraid of the Alliance of Order." Perfected Chu glanced at the nearby Star Lord and did not speak. The Star Lord's expression was calm and did not speak. Yi Xian said again, "Everyone, I'm afraid that when I fight with you against the Kingdom of God, the Alliance of Order will stab me in the back. What should I do?" Perfected Chu smiled. "Before the Kingdom of God arrives, we don't care about any grievances. But now that the Kingdom of God is invading, we must unite." When he spoke up to this point, he gazed at the Star Lord. "You're probably thinking the same, right?" The Star Lord spoke indifferently. "Actually, all of you should be worried that he will side with the Kingdom of God. If he does, and he's skilled in assassination." The art of assassination. The expressions of everyone here changed slightly when they heard this. Besides the 5 of them, no other saint would be able to suppress Yi Xian's strength. Moreover, if he were to assassinate Qin Shi, then even those saints would probably be unable to stop him. Because Yi Xian had a precious treasure in his possession right now. Yi Xian suddenly started laughing. The Demon King suddenly said, "What are you laughing at?" Yi Xian laughed, "I'm laughing at the Kingdom of God. They haven't even attacked us, but we're about to face internal strife. As he spoke, he glanced at the others. Everyone, all of you should be aware of the enmity between me and the Alliance of Order. In order to kill me, the Alliance of Order didn't hesitate to send an army to Divine Martial City to capture my younger sister. How old is she? She's just a little girl, but the Alliance of Order actually did such a despicable thing. When he spoke up to this point, he pointed angrily at the Star Lord and said fiercely, "You think you're the strongest in this world? You're worse than a dog for your actions. I'm looking down on you." The Star Lord's eyes narrowed slightly. In the next moment, a powerful pressure directly crushed down towards Yi Xian. Yi Xian smiled coldly. With a flip of his right hand, the executing heaven sword appeared in his hand, and then he raised his hand and slashed down. The pressure was directly shattered by the sword, but Yi Xian retreated to the entrance of the hall. The Star Lord was about to attack again when he seemed to have thought of something and looked at Perfected Master Chu. "Brother Chu, did you see that? It's not that the Alliance of Order doesn't want to consider the overall situation, but he doesn't." Perfected Master Chu looked at Yi Xian. "I've always thought that you're a smart person, but now it seems that I'm wrong." Yi Xian said with a smile, "I know. You called me here because you want to see my attitude. If I am smart enough to be your sword to deal with the divine nation, you will spare my life. Otherwise, if I am not smart enough, you will kill me to get rid of the trouble in the future." Speaking up to here, he looked at Spiritual Master Chu. "If you want me to go against the God Nation, I can, but there are two requirements. First, the experts of the Order Alliance who attacked my martial institution and sword sect must die. Second, the Star Lord must go to my Divine Martial City and apologize to the tombstones of my martial institution's dean and sword sect's sect master. If that's the case, I can temporarily put aside my grudge with the Alliance of Order." Hearing this, the Star Lord was expressionless, but his eyes were full of sarcasm. Beside him, Tang Yen also shook his head, unable to conceal the disappointment in his eyes. Perfected Master Chu looked at Yi Xian. "Then you might be disappointed." As he spoke, deep in his eyes, there was already killing intent. Yi Xian nodded. "Everyone, let's do it." As he spoke, he turned to look at the sky and said softly, "Master, this disciple is unlucky. I can't go to the fifth dimension to play chess with you." Fifth dimension. Hearing this, everyone's expression instantly changed. P.S. Recommend a book that's only second to my good-looking friend, Chang Ning Imperial Army, also published by Zhanjing. Friends who are lacking in books can go read it. It's equivalent to a historical fantasy, very good. This month's third update, the monthly votes are a little more, but there are some trolls. These trolls' words have caused devastating damage to my young heart. If I scold him, he'll say, "Damn, this is an author? Such an uncultured author actually scolding people, is he worthy to write a book?" I found out that trolls have double standards. They use the standards of saints to treat others, and use the standards of bitches to treat themselves. I know that some readers will say, "If a dog bites you, will you bite back?" Little do they know that this is what the trolls think. They think, I bite you, why don't you bite me?" After saying so much, it's time to get to the main topic. There are two titles for the next book. Everyone help me refer to The Invincible Troll, and The Troll is Supreme. Which one does everyone think is better? You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.